Chapter 65. The people from the imperial palace, 1, Jian Chen and Chongyang, who returned to their respective mother's side and walked with the others towards the main hall of the Chongyang mansion. Ahu, you've suffered greatly at the academy. Just look at your scars. On the way, Jian Chen's eldest aunt, Jinglong, looked at the scars on Chongyang, whose face with eyes wet with tears that never seemed to cease. Chongyang, who could only laugh as he replied, "Mother, these are only small injuries, nothing to worry about. It was a good thing fourth brother found me. Otherwise, your child would have been left unable to even move from bed." Hearing this, Jinglong turned her head to look at Jian Chen with a gentle smile on her face. "Xiang Tian, I really must thank you for helping Ahu." Jian Chen smiled back. "Eldest aunt, what are you saying? If my big brother has a problem, of course I'd help. Besides, this happened because of me and big brother was caught up into it. As long as eldest aunt doesn't blame me, then I be happy enough." Jinglong still had a smile on her face. "Xiang Tian, you're becoming more and more intelligent. You're almost becoming just like Ahu now." Praise from eldest aunt. Jian Chen laughed. He could clearly tell that eldest aunt Jinglong's attitude towards him had improved. She was no longer so solemn and unmoving towards him. No longer was she like before, always wearing a neutral face. "Mother, you should say it right. Fourth brother's strength is really amazing. Before he was even a saint, he could easily hunt and kill Class 2 magical beasts. And after he did become one, even the combined powers of the geniuses of cultivation of Kargath Academy, despite having the genius upper Saint Chengming Xiang among their ranks, were beaten in under 3 minutes. The 10 other who followed them were also easily beaten up by fourth brother as well." Chongyang, who was clearly excited, his voice was rising in volume as he spoke. "Mother, you didn't see the fight, but I did. Although fourth brother was by himself, he had beaten a dozen people until they were covered with bruises in the blink of an eye. These dozen people were all at the rank of a saint at the very least, but against fourth brother, they were no match at all." Hearing this, Jian Chen's mother Bai Yun Tian beamed with happiness as she looked at her son with loving affection. "Humph." A cold sneer came from the side. It was from Jian Chen's third aunt, Bai Yu Shuang, who continued to say, "Amazing is amazing, but it was this amazingness that provoked the Hua Yun sect. Chongyang Xiang Tian's amazingness is practically inviting danger to our Chongyang mansion." Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together. His third aunt Bai Yu Shuang had always treated him with prejudice since he was young. Jian Chen's mother, Bai Yun Tian, was extremely discontent. However, the one that had caused trouble was her own son, and even she slightly felt that he was in the wrong. In addition, his relationship with Bai Yu Shuang was never good. Thus, she couldn't claim he wasn't guilty either, otherwise the little feud between the two would only grow. "Forget it, third sister. What's happened has already happened. Discussing it now isn't of any use. What we should do now is to properly consider how we should deal with it." Jian Chen's second aunt Yu Fengyan explained. "Forget it, third sister. After all, Xiang Tian stirred up this trouble for the sake of saving Ahu. You can't blame everything on Xiang Tian." Jinglong sided with Jian Chen. Seeing that there were actually 2 people supporting Jian Chen, Bai Yu Shuang could only snort and stay silent. Bai Yun Tian sighed. Her gaze held both love and worry as she looked at Jian Chen and said, "Xiang heir, we know of all of your achievements at Kargath Academy. You are my pride and glory, but I also think that your actions this time were too brash. To think that you even cut off the Hu Yun sect leader's son's arm. Do you know that with this, you've not only caused major trouble for yourself, but you've also dragged the entire Chongyang clan in with you as well?" A trace of guilt was shown on Jian Chen's face as he said, "Sorry mother, I have brought a great trouble to our clan. Xiang Tian, what happened has already happened. You should stop blaming yourself. Right now we need to go to the main hall quickly to discuss how to settle this conflict." Second aunt then closed her mouth. After that, the group started to pick up their pace as they headed towards the main hall. At this moment within a splendid palace, the Emperor of Jessan Kingdom held a letter in the middle of his hands. Creasing together his eyebrows, he let out a long sigh before saying, "This Chongyang Xiang Tian is truly too impulsive. He has made a great mistake by cutting off the right arm of the Hua Yun sect's Chengming Xiang. This type of situation is something the Chongyang clan cannot stand up against." The Emperor released the letter and watched it drop to the table. "Servant, call the armored forces commander by Dao to come quickly." "Yes, your majesty." As the Emperor gave out his command, the court eunuch hurried out to obey his orders. Soon enough, A black-armored middle-aged man came walking into the room. This man's appearance was rather ordinary-looking, but he had a resolute expression on his face. His eyes shined brightly below his scarred face. The scars ran across his entire forehead, causing people to jump at his terrifying appearance. The man walked towards the emperor before stopping 10 meters away from him. "Your Majesty, this servant knows not why he has been called here." The emperor slowly stood up as he grabbed the letter in his hand and handed it to the man. "Take a look." Hearing this, the middle-aged male wearing black armor received the letter from the emperor and opened it to begin reading. After he finished, his expression had become extremely heavy. I hadn't imagined that he would actually stir up so much trouble." The black-armored man let out a long sigh as his expression became anxious. The younger generations always seem to be so arrogant and impulsive. The emperor sighed. "Bai Dao, ever since you joined the armored forces 20 years ago, you've never returned back to your homeland. Take this opportunity today and visit." "Yes, Your Majesty." A complex look flashed in the armored youth's eyes. The emperor's expression suddenly turned serious as he said, "Bai Dao, when you return this time, you must persuade Chongyang clan's people to send Chongyang Xiangtian over here as quickly as possible. Otherwise, once the Hua Yun sect goes looking for them, the conflict will grow even more. Only by sending Chongyang Xiangtian away, in addition to us mediating between them, will the conflict between the Chongyang clan and the Hua Yun sect be temporarily stabilized. Right now, all of the neighboring nations are already beginning to stir. It seems that they've never let go of the idea of attacking my Gusun kingdom's territory. At a moment as critical as this, nothing can be allowed to occur within the kingdom. Otherwise, the end result will be too horrible to even think about. Chongyang Xiangtian is a genius from the heavens with unlimited potential. His future prospects truly cannot be measured, maybe the only source of hope that Gusun kingdom has ever had in the last few hundred years. For this reason, Chongyang Xiangtian must be protected at all costs. Although we cannot guarantee his future achievements will go smoothly, we cannot allow him to get involved in an accident within our Gusun kingdom." The emperor spoke with a hard face. Hearing this, the armored youth showed a proud and joyous expression. He suppressed the rising emotions within his heart and said, "Young Majesty, Bai Dao understands what he should do now." The emperor nodded his head and said, "Bai Dao, there's no time to lose. You must head out to Chongyang Mansion immediately. With your strength, you should be able to arrive there before sunrise." "Yes, Your Majesty." Within the great halls of the Chongyang Mansion, Chongyang Ba sat down onto his throne, with Jian Chen on one side and his fellow wives on the other side. Sitting a few steps below was the relieved housekeeper Chong Bai. Chongyang Ba had a look of worry on his face as he looked at his son Jian Chen. Xiang Er's situation at Kargath Academy should be known to everyone here already. The Hua Yun sect leader's son had his right arm cut off, so the Hua Yun sect will definitely not let this matter go. Please offer up what solutions you may have. Hearing this, everyone in the hall went silent. The Hua Yun sect was the biggest force of power aside from the royal family in the Gusun kingdom, and didn't fear the emperor's power at all. The Chongyang clan wouldn't be able to resist their sect since Chengming Xiang was like a treasured son of the sect leader. Since he was a genius that far exceeded the others, to have his arm chopped off by Jian Chen would definitely influence his future road of achievements. It could be said with no exaggeration that Jian Chen had completely destroyed Chengming Xiang. So for that reason everyone knew within their hearts that there would be no way for the Hua Yun sect to forgive this matter. Everyone was still silent before finally a 60-year-old elder said, "The best way to solve this problem is to find and invite a Radiant Saint Master to help repair Chengming Xiang's arm. However, only a rank 7 Radiant Saint Master would have the power to do something on this level. Our Chongyang clan would not be able to easily call on such a person. Not only that, but rank 7 Radiant Saint Masters are extremely rare within the Tianyuan continent, and many of them are wanderers. It would be easier to climb to the heavens than to find one, so the possibility of healing Chengming Xiang's arm is practically zero." What you're saying is correct. In my opinion, our only chance of appeasing the anger of the Hua Yun sect aside from finding a Radiant Saint Master is to have the Emperor and the royal family back us up. However, the Hua Yun sect would definitely not give up their chances. What is guaranteed is that the fourth master will not be easy to protect. A middle-aged person said. Standing by the middle-aged man were a few other elders who had high amounts of influence within the clan. They have long since heard about Jian Chen's achievements within the academy, and in their hearts, They had already started to place their hopes for the clan's survivals onto Jian Chen. So even though the clan was being troubled by a big problem, no one had blamed him for it and instead tried their best to find ways to protect him. Not only that, but with the arranged marriage between him and Princess Gulan, then after the marriage, the Chongyang clan would be able to rise higher in power. If only the ancestor was still here. An elder sighed helplessly. Hearing this, Chongbai's eyes lit up. That's right, if the master was here, then our clan wouldn't need to assemble here today to figure out a solution. It's a shame. The master has already been gone for dozens of years without any notice. We don't even know if he is alive or not. The crowd went silent after hearing that. Jian Chen's heart pulsed after hearing Chongbai talk. From his few years at the Chongyang mansion, he had never once heard about this ancestor or Chongbai's master come up as a topic before. Although he had only just heard about the two, he was sure in his heart that these two people were actually very strong and had power incomparable to anyone else. Most likely the two were not afraid of the Huayun sect and were former elders of the clan. Jian Chen didn't bother to think about his question long, and immediately dismissed it from his mind. Seeing how the hall was still silent, Jian Chen hesitated slightly before saying, "Father, it would be better for Chongbai's eagle beast to send me out. As long as I do not remain within Chongyang mansion, I am sure the Huayun sect will not act upon the clan if they truly do come." "No, absolutely not." The moment Jian Chen spoke, Bai Yun Tian and Chongyang Ba's voices both simultaneously rose up in objection. Both of Bai Yun Tian's hands tightly grasped onto Jian Chen's own hands as her eyes gradually became misty before tears started to stream down her face. She cried, "Xiang Er, don't say such foolish things. The Tian Yuan continent is very dangerous, and it's not as easygoing as you think it is. You have not yet explored the world, so you don't know what rules must be followed in order to survive. Your strength is still too low. Mother will definitely not let you go on such a foolish endeavor." Chapter 66. The People from the Imperial Palace, 2. That's right, Xiang Er, what your mother said is correct. The world isn't as peaceful as the academy is. It's filled with slaughter. And with your current strength, being able to survive won't be that easy. Forget about this idea. I absolutely won't agree to it. Chongyang Ba said seriously. Although he spoke in an ordinary tone, he had been firm in rejecting Jian Chen's idea. Jian Chen already knew that it would be hard to get his family to agree to this plan, but he continued to speak. "Father, Mother, please don't worry about me. Your son may not be strong, but I am still able to protect myself. I've read many books from the Academy Library, and so I have some familiarity on how to survive within the Tianyuan continent. Once your child leaves Chongyang Mansion, then that'll be one less problem for the clan. Fourth Master, the situation isn't as simple as you think. If the Huayun sect were to find out that you are no longer within the Chongyang Mansion, then I'm afraid that they would send out many of their numbers to pursue you. And with the Huayun sect's power, you won't be hard to locate." A white-haired elder spoke in his heart. He had placed Jian Chen as the hope for the clan's future, and definitely did not want to see him die prematurely. He was a 15-year-old saint who was stronger than an upper-level saint, and bordered along the powers of a great saint. This meant that he was a genius from the heavens that would shake the entire Tianyuan continent. To some of the men here, Jian Chen was no longer just a regular person, but a glowing human treasure that could give them boundless wealth. For that reason, within the hearts of the high-ranked elders, they all just wanted to protect Jian Chen so he wouldn't suffer a blow to his future potential. Jian Chen let loose a big smile. "Everyone doesn't need to worry. I've read up about a lot about the continent, so I'm sure that I can keep away from the Huayun sect's grasp." "Definitely not, Xiang Er. This is still too risky. It's not worth the trouble." Chongyang Ba immediately shot down the proposal. "Xiang Er, don't worry about a thing. While the Huayun sect may be very strong, our Chongyang clan won't be such an easy pushover, and although our ancestor has been gone for some years, his reputation is still widely known. The Huayun sect wouldn't dare to be so forward with our clan. So just stay within the mansion. I will do my best to protect you." Jian Chen inwardly sighed to himself. With such a resolute objection, there would be no way for him to convince his father otherwise. "That's right, Xiang Er. This idea of yours is far too risky. Even if you could escape from the Huayun sect, the life of the Tianyuan continent is not as straightforward and simple as the books say. Please just obediently stay at Chongyang Mansion. Your father and your uncles will do their best to protect you." Bai Yun Tian gently pleaded with Jian Chen. Chongyang Ba cleared his voice. That's enough. Let's first talk about how we'll deal with the Hua Yun sect. I'm sure they have already heard about this situation and will arrive at Lore City soon, so we are pressed for time. Chongyang Ba stated once more. The entire crowd within the main hall went silent as they all started to think about the situation. If His Majesty helps us, then that means the arranged wedding between the Fourth Master and Princess Golan is still on. So in the end, the Fourth Master will still be the son-in-law to the Emperor, so I'm sure His Majesty won't sit around and do nothing. Someone said. Chongbai nodded his head in contemplation and said, if His Majesty wants to support us, then he could temporarily suppress the situation, but this will no doubt bring His Majesty quite a headache. It is unfortunate timing right now as well. The neighboring countries have been inconspicuously sending soldiers to the borders. Most likely, they want to invade the richly fertile lands of the Jesson Kingdom. So right now, His Majesty definitely would not want to get onto the bad side of the Hua Yun sect. After all, this is a matter of life or death for the kingdom. Without the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Hua Yun sect, even the strongest fighters would be hard-pressed to fight against the other kingdom soldiers. Although the Fourth Master has a very strong potential, and also has high expectations from His Majesty, the Fourth Master's future achievements currently cannot be confirmed. Not only that, but the Fourth Master is still young, so there is still a long time before he can fully mature. With the kingdom on the verge of a war, there is simply not enough time for them to wait around for the Fourth Master, since we're not sure how long it'll be before the kingdom either wins or loses. The kingdom will need as many strong saints as possible in order to help win the war, so it's not clear if His Majesty will help us or not. The people in the main hall continue to attempt to come up with other ways. However, despite having contemplated for an entire evening, they were still unable to come up with any workable method. The night flew by quickly under the strained atmosphere the dozen people were in. The sky had already begun to brighten. It was already close to dawn. After an entire night of discussion, everyone's expressions looked exhausted. At this moment, a Chongyang clan patrolman came running in, reporting to the clan leader, there is a person named Bai Dao waiting outside the mansion who wishes to see you. Bai Dao! Chongyang Bar exclaimed under his breath with a contemplative look. His eyes shined brightly as he stood up from his throne. Quickly invite him in. Yes, sir. The guard responded, and quickly left. Hearing the name of Bai Dao, Bai Yun Tian started to tremble from where she was standing with a look of happiness. But soon that look changed into one of puzzlement. Jian Chen became confused as he noticed the change in his mother's expression. He had never heard of Bai Dao before, however, judging from his mother's reaction, this Bai Dao most likely had some type of relationship with his mother. Jian Chen slowly approached his mother before asking, Mother, who is this Bai Dao person? Bai Yun Tian slowly turned around, her eyes looking at her adored son. Xiang Er, Mother will tell you about this in a bit. Okay. Jian Chen nodded and did not inquire any further. Not too long after, a black-robed male came in with long strides. The man had a determined look on his face and his eyes refused to stop shining with energy. Looking at the man's forehead, many different scars could be seen. Chongyang Ba stopped his actions and walked up to the center of the discussion hall. He greeted and smiled, Brother Bai Dao, I can't believe it's been 20 years since we last met. How have you been? The middle-aged man named Bai Dao greeted back and said, I've been okay. He paused for a moment, his gaze stopping on Jian Chen and his mother, before continuing, it's probably better if I just get straight to the point. I've come this time under the Emperor's orders. At the same time, I've come to transmit his orders. Hearing this, Chongyan Ba's face became solemn as he asked, Brother Bai Dao, could this concern Xiang Er as well? Bai Dao nodded his head, that's right. His Majesty has allowed your Chongyang Xiang Tian to be escorted far away from Lore City. Only by doing this will the conflict between Chongyang Mansion and the Hua Yun sect be temporarily abated. Chongyang Ba furrowed his eyebrows together. In his heart, he did not want to follow along with this solution. Bai Dao continued, the trouble this time really is a bit too great. Cheng Ming Xiang is Hua Yun sect's only son, and he's a talented person that will eventually become Hua Yun sect's next leader. For Chongyang Xiang Tian to have cut off Cheng Ming Xiang's right arm destroyed him without question. Thus, the Hua Yun sect will definitely not let this matter drop lightly. The Hua Yun sect has two Heaven Saint Masters, people that the Chongyang clan cannot afford to fight with. Although His Majesty also has two other Heaven Saint Masters by his side, but with trouble brewing at the borders of the country, then the Jesson Kingdom will be involved in a war soon enough. By that point, His Majesty cannot afford to get on the bad side of the Hua Yun sect. It is only with Chongyang Xiang Tian being escorted out of Lore City, and under the control of His Majesty that this situation can be solved temporarily, and fix the issues within the Jessan Kingdom. Could it be that there's really no other way? Jian Chen's second aunt, Yu Fengyan, asked. None. Bai Dao shook his head. His tone filled with complete certainty. Bai Yun Tian's expression turned ashen, and she said in a trembling voice, however, the people outside are dangerous. Xiang Er's strength is still weak. He'll definitely suffer through a lot of hardships. Bai Dao gave a profound look at the Jian Chen sitting next to Bai Yun Tian and said, one must suffer hardships in their life while upholding their dignity as a person. It is only after they suffer through thick and thin that they can mature into an independent person. You both pamper him too much. This won't do him any favors, it's actually harming him. Hearing Bai Dao, a few of the gathered people nodded their heads in agreement. There was a great deal of logic within his words. Chongyang Ba still looked hesitant at this idea. Jian Chen swept his gaze over his surroundings. He knew that this was his chance to strike out for an advantage and said, Father, just let me leave. I am confident that I can cope with anything that I'll encounter in the future. Moreover, I really want to go outside to travel the world. Clan leader, since the fourth master had originally planned to leave the mansion, what Bai Dao said is correct. This may be the only way to solve the conflict between the two groups. With this method, the fourth master will definitely learn a lot. Even if the fourth master is a genius that surpasses others, his experience is still what matters most. Chong Bai said. Chongyang Ba helplessly sighed and said, fine. Since Chong Bai also agrees to this suggestion, then Xiang Er will leave Lore City and experience the outside world for a while. I'll let a few devoted guards leave with Xiang Er to keep him safe outside. Once he heard that guards would be dispatched to protect him, Jian Chen's brows couldn't help but knit together as he said, Father, there's no need to dispatch guards. I want to go adventure outside alone. Xiang Er, going out by yourself is still far too dangerous. At the very least, please take some guards to go with you in case you come across any trouble. Bai Yun Tian held onto Jian Chen's hands in concern. With the current matters, she was powerless to change the decision, and so she could only try to accept this decision calmly. No need, mother. I don't want to bring guards out. If that happens, I'll be too easy to target. I think that going out alone is easier. Jian Chen's attitude was extremely firm. In reality, in his opinion, having a few guards by his side was a type of burden. In addition, once outside, he couldn't always be as cautious with conserving his strength as he was at home. He still had many secrets that he couldn't let anyone in his family know of. Chapter 67. By Clan Chongyang Ba wanted to reject Jian Chen's proposal of going alone, but Jian Chen had been adamant in his decision. So in the end, Chongyang Ba had no choice but to agree. After the discussions were over, Bai Dao said, from what I heard in the royal palace, the Hua Yun sect has already received the news and is moving towards Lore City at top speed. They'll be at Lore City by late afternoon at the very latest, so it would be best if you send Chongyang Xiang Tian away from Lore City as soon as possible. Otherwise, it'll be too late by nighttime. Everyone's faces became solemn once more. Then, Chong Bai stood up and said, Then let's have the fourth master gather his things before I take him away on the eagle beast. Soon after that, everyone started to leave the main hall. Xiang Er, please go to mother's room. There are matters we must discuss. Bai Yun Tian said as she walked towards her room. After entering her room, Bai Yun Tian pulled Jian Chen with her to sit with him. By this point, Bai Yun Tian's cheeks had tears streaming down her face. She knew in her heart that after Jian Chen left Chongyang Mansion, it would be a very long time before the mother and son would be able to meet again. Life in the Tianyuan continent was complex, and Jian Chen didn't know what hardships he would go through or what unfortunate events would happen to him. So this was possibly the last time the mother and son would ever see each other again. Xiang Er, you are no longer young in age and you'll soon be leaving this place. So there are things that mother should tell you first. Bai Yun Tian's tears shone like sparkling crystals as they dripped from her face. Xiang Er, didn't you ever think why it was strange that you didn't have a grandfather or grandmother? Jian Chen nodded his head without making a sound. Bai Yun Tian continued to say, Xiang Er, your mother is actually not from the Jessan Kingdom. My homelands originate from one of three biggest empires, the Karl Empire. Not only that, But my Bai clan has been a powerful family that goes back for over 1,000 years. It had a powerful influence stronger than that of the Hua Yun sect and resided in the king city Minghua City. Your grandfather was a powerful saint ruler, while you have 4 other great elders who have reached the Heaven Saint Master level and hold high positions in our Bai clan. Bai Yun Tian sighed. It's a shame good things don't last forever. While your mother was still young, your grandfather received a letter and never returned, leaving behind no information at all. 20 years after the disappearance of your grandfather, the 4 elders of the clan sent 2 people to look for him. 2 days after their search began, however, an astonishing piece of information was reported. The 2 that were sent out had been killed in the countryside. Bai Yun Tian's face was full of sorrow after saying that. This piece of information was like a bolt of lightning coming from a clear sky. While the 2 elders were only at the Heaven Saint Master level, they were still considered as some of the strongest in the Tianyuan continent, so it was inconceivable to think that they could be killed. The elders didn't even have time to run, and so to this day, the Bai clan are still clueless on what enemy could be strong enough to have such a grudge towards our Bai clan. Your grandfather may have encountered something similar as well. Unfortunately, our mysterious enemies didn't even give us time to catch our breath. On the very same night of the murders, a huge group of mysterious men invaded our Bai clan. They were all very strong, and the remaining 2 elders were unable to repel them. Ultimately, they got killed. Without the powerful elders, there were no longer any strong people left to protect us. At that moment, some loyal members of the clan tried to help a group of us escape the massacre. But in the end, only your mother and uncle were left. It was only after your uncle and I hid in a family home that we were able to escape from Minghua City with our lives. After hiding for a few hours, we turned our heads and immediately left via a mercenary caravan heading towards the Jessen kingdom. The tears were still flowing from Bai Yun Tian's face as she cried in deep sorrow. Xiang Er, at that moment of greatness, we had over 1,000 members to our name. But to this day, all that remains is your uncle and the 2 of us. You must remember that you not only have the blood of the Chongyang clan in you, but the blood of the Bai clan as well. You must carry on the Bai clan's name, so please remember to protect yourself. Do you understand? Jian Chen nodded his head in silence as his heart churned with emotions. For a very long time he couldn't calm himself, since the news his mother had told him had struck the very core of his emotions. After some time, Jian Chen finally calmed himself down and said, "Mother, could it be that we still haven't figured out our mysterious enemy's identity or how strong they are?" Bai Yun Tian shook her head. "I have no idea. Your mother and uncle were still young at the time and so we didn't understand much. So we had no idea who they were. If anyone knew, it would be the elders, but they're dead now." Afterwards, Bai Yun Tian fished out a red embroidered pouch and looked at it as if it was bringing back old memories. "Xiang Er, before your grandfather disappeared, he gave me this red pouch and said it was a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation. By this point, it's well over 1,000 years old, so please take care of it. Those mysterious men had most likely exterminated our Bai clan for treasures like this." Jian Chen's eyes looked at the embroidered red pouch and said, "Mother, what exactly is in this then? There's only a small piece of fur that's smaller than the size of one's palms inside." "Your mother has no idea what it's used for." Bai Yun Tian placed the red pouch onto Jian Chen's hands and said, "Xiang Er, even if this pouch only has fur in it, it's still a family heirloom, so there's no way this piece of fur is not simple at all. Right now you are the Bai clan's only hope, so passing down the family heirloom should be a given. I hope you protect yourself well, but it's best if you keep this pouch hidden at all costs. Although it'll be unlikely to come across a person that recognizes it, it's better to be safe than sorry." Jian Chen silently nodded as he took the red pouch. Dong dong dong. At that moment, a knock was heard on the door as a voice called out from the other side. Quickly wiping away her tears, Bai Yun Tian called out, "Who is it?" There was no sound outside the door for some time. Eventually a voice said, "Sister, it's me." Hearing that familiar voice, one that he had not too long ago heard, Jian Chen stared blankly at the door. It was the man from the palace, Bai Dao. Hearing the voice, Bai Yun Tian looked puzzled before saying, "Come in." The doors opened as a black-robed man slowly walked in. It was precisely Bai Dao. Bai Yun Tian slowly stood up from her chair as she looked at him with a pained expression. "Brother, it has been 20 years since you last saw me. I had thought that you had already forgotten about me." Jian Chen's stare hardened. From the fact that his mother called him her brother, He could already tell that the middle-aged man in front of him was his uncle. AI Bai Dao sighed. Sister, I'm sorry, your older brother was wrong to not visit you during the last 20 years. In truth, your brother never forgot about you. It was just that the burdens your brother was carrying were too heavy to bear. Vengeance for our Bai clan will definitely be carried out by me. Sister, your brother will live out the rest of his life for the sole purpose of revenge. Bai Yun Tian sighed as well, before turning her head to look at Jian Chen. Xiang Heir, this is your uncle, Bai Dao. Uncle. Jian Chen spoke. This was the first time he had uttered the word, as well as the first time he had seen him up close. Bai Dao sized up Jian Chen before offering a smile. Xiang Tian, I have heard about you. Word of your accomplishments has resounded through the capital, and have even been whispered of inside the royal palace. You are truly worthy of being a descendant of our Bai clan. I eagerly anticipate the day when you have grown strong and honorable. Do not disappoint me. After talking, Bai Dao immediately grew solemn once more as he faced Bai Yun Tian. Sister, I know you hate to see Xiang Tian leave, but there is no other way. As it stands now, the Chongyang clan cannot oppose the Hua Yun sect, but if Xiang Tian leaves, the situation will improve dramatically for both the clan and Xiang Tian. Letting Xiang Tian stay in the mansion will bring no good benefits. It may even cause the Chongyang clan to end up like our Bai clan. Right now we just need to smuggle Xiang Tian away before nightfall. Otherwise, he won't be able to leave, even if you agreed to let him go. Bai Yun Tian nodded her head slowly. Since the emperor wasn't willing to help them publicly right now, how could she not understand this reasoning? Afterwards, the tear-streaked Bai Yun Tian helped Jian Chen gather some clothes and items before escorting him out. As the two of them arrived at the rear courtyard, they found Jian Chen's aunts, his father, and Changbai were there waiting for him. Right behind them stood a gigantic and majestic eagle beast. Chongyang, who grabbed Jian Chen's arm, his expression downtrodden as he spoke with concern. Fourth brother, you'd better be careful in the outside world, understand? Jian Chen nodded before saying with a smile. Don't worry, big brother, I will definitely protect myself. But after I go, you'd better not goof off. You must continue practicing the battle techniques. Chongyang, who nodded his head fiercely and said, I will, fourth brother. Your elder brother's lack of strength has burdened you. From now on, I will strive even harder to cultivate and grow stronger. Jian Chen's second sister, Chongyang Mingyu, walked up to him and gave him a spice bag. Fourth brother, your second sister made you a safety charms and wishes you safe travels. You'd better wear it. Right now, Chongyang Mingyu was already 18. She had become a tall yet slender beautiful girl that was capable of causing an entire city to fight for her. Jian Chen took the safety charm from her. Although he knew that the charm wouldn't provide any substantial amount of defense, it was still a gift from his sister that was filled with concern. Thank you, second sister. I will definitely take care of this charm, he said with a smile. Chongyang Ba walked forward with a ring and spoke. Xiang Heir, this is a space ring your father had long since prepared for you. This was meant to be your graduation present from Kargath Academy. But I don't believe you need to wait that long for it anymore. Your father will give you this space ring. There is already something I have prepared for you inside. Thank you, father. With a grateful look, Jian Chen took the space ring. Xiang Heir, the space ring is absolutely a precious item within the Tian Yuan continent. In order to avoid unnecessary troubles, don't reveal your space ring to anyone, even under the most dire circumstances. Chongyang Ba said. Jian Chen nodded. Father, Xiang Heir understands. Chapter 68. White Cloud City. After everyone had finished talking, Jian Chen left with Changbai on the back of the eagle beast and immediately departed from Lore City. Sitting on top of the eagle beast, Jian Chen stared at the receding city walls with a complicated look on his face. It's been over 15 years since he came into this world, and he has only left the confines of the mansion and Lore City twice. The first time he had left Lore City was to go to Kargath Academy, but this time, the reason was no longer the same. Jian Chen understood that after leaving, he wouldn't see his family again for a very long time, and would have to fend for himself. In this dangerous environment known as the Tian Yuan continent, Jian Chen could only rely on himself. Jian Chen personally didn't think he would be able to see his family again, but he had read from the books that this world was dominated by the strong. The Tian Yuan continent was a lot more dangerous than his previous world, and while he had decent strength for his age, there was no guarantee for what may happen. Changbai sat on the neck of the eagle beast and stared at Jian Chen. Fourth master, starting from today you'll be on your own. Please be careful as you travel through the Tianyuan continent. I know what must be done, Changbai. Jian Chen said without turning his head. Changbai paused to look at Jian Chen with a curious look before sighing as he had no more to say. The eagle beast flew high in the sky, thousands of meters above the ground, streaking across the sky like a ray of light. With the whistle of the wind blowing loudly, both Changbai and Jian Chen had their hair and clothes flapping rapidly in the wind. The eagle beast soared over the walls of countless tiny villages before finally the eagle beast slowly came to a stop, in midair in front of the walls of a great city. Looking down to see the city, Jian Chen asked, Changbai, you should just drop me off here. Hearing this, Changbai looked down to see the tiny city before nodding his head. If you say so. Immediately, the eagle beast flew down towards the ground under his control. Jian Chen hopped off of the magical beast before saying to Changbai, Changbai, you should hurry on home. I'm sure the Hua Yun sect has already arrived at the Chongyang mansion. Changbai started to ascend with his eagle beast. Fourth master, please take care. Jian Chen waved goodbye to Changbai and turned around to walk towards the city in front of him. Changbai hesitated as he sat on the eagle beast and watched Jian Chen's back go further and further away. It was only after he had disappeared when Changbai said, Fourth master, I hope we see each other soon. You've always surprised me after all. The eagle beast started to flap its wings and flew into the sky, blowing dust everywhere. Soon, Changbai flew off into the air towards the direction of the Chongyang mansion. The sun has already long since set into the horizon. With the colors of nightfall rapidly approaching, Jian Chen walked towards the small city with a group of people. However, while he was walking on foot, many of them were traveling via carriages being pulled by magical beasts. Jian Chen's appearance had naturally made the other travelers curious, and made many other mercenaries become alert. But when they realized how young Jian Chen was, they immediately lost their alertness. Jian Chen sized up the mercenaries riding on top of the magical beasts. Some of them ranged from 20 years old to 50 years old. Some wore armor, some leather, and some just wore regular clothes. When Jian Chen walked closer to them, however, he could smell the scent of blood. To the experienced Jian Chen, he knew that these mercenaries had been baptized with the blood of their enemies already. 10 miles wasn't that far for Jian Chen, and so after some time, he saw the 20-meter-high city walls. Jian Chen didn't know how old the walls were, but the constant battle with time seemed to have left its mark on them. Visible scars could be seen on the walls, but near the gate written with bold calligraphy were the words, White Cloud City. Hey, halt! What is your purpose here? Barring Jian Chen's path was a guard of the city. Jian Chen gave a small smile and handed the god a few gold coins and said, Brother, I am merely a mercenary who came to White Cloud City for a mission. The guard took the gold coins discreetly and smiled brightly at him. Ah, so you have a mission, then I won't take up your precious time, go on in. After entering the city, Jian Chen walked 3 kilometers down the road, and arrived at a very busy part of the city. Although it was sunset, the street was still bustling with people rushing around from store to store and engaged in every sort of business. The streets were paved with rocks that seemed to shine brightly. With the road so evenly paved, even if a caravan ran full speed across it, the passengers wouldn't feel the slightest jolt. Hungry, Jian Chen rubbed his stomach gingerly as he walked towards the nearest restaurant. It had already been a full day since he had eaten, so his stomach had already started to protest. Welcome, guest. Under the enthusiastic welcome of a waiter, Jian Chen walked towards an empty table and sat down. Honored guest, are you here for a meal or to stay for the night? The waiter was a young man in his 20s, and had a cordial smile on his face. Jian Chen looked at the other rowdy mercenaries within the restaurant and said, Even those who are staying for the night require a meal. What is there to eat here? The waiter smiled and introduced Jian Chen to a wide variety of dishes. However, every single one of the dishes mentioned were all the most expensive dishes. The waiter had long since noticed Jian Chen was wearing quite luxurious clothes and thought him out to be the son of a wealthy clan. But Jian Chen didn't care for the prices of the dishes and instead lazily chose one out to eat. After eating his fill, Jian Chen paid for a medium-sized room for the night and immediately entered his room to rest. The restaurant was not a very high-quality one, so the medium-sized room was not too luxurious. Compared to the Chongyang mansion, the difference was like comparing the heavens to the earth. The room offered a hardwood bed with a single table and a few chairs, but apart from that, there was nothing more. On a side note, the room had been cleaned nicely. Jian Chen had never been picky, and so this room had already satisfied him enough. After closing his door, Jian Chen walked towards his bed and took out the space ring his father had given him before leaving and looked at the contents. The space ring deserved to be called a high-quality treasure as there were many objects within it. With an internal storage of up to 100 cubic meters, there were a pile of items stacked in the middle of it. While the ring wasn't full, almost every inch of the floor had been covered by items. Amongst a pile of items, there were 1,000 purple coins that sparkled dazzlingly along with another few thousand gold coins stacked in another pile. There were even small piles of monster cores, around 40 of them were Class 2 monster cores, 10 of them were Class 3 monster cores, and only one of them was a Class 4 monster core. Seeing how many items were stored inside the space ring, Jian Chen felt very warm inside. Although it wasn't by any means a large amount of items, they all served a practical use for Jian Chen's needs. With this much, it truly showed how much Ba cared for his son. Stuffing the space ring back into his bosom, Jian Chen clearly remembered the words of his father. Until he was strong enough, he didn't dare to reveal his ring to anyone since it was such a precious item on the Tianyuan continent. Although there weren't a small amount of people who had a space ring, they were all strong members of influential and wealthy clans and could easily protect themselves from danger. Climbing onto the bed, Jian Chen took a few monster cores from within the space ring and closed his eyes as he started to cultivate using the energy from within the monster cores. As usual, Jian Chen started to absorb the energy within the monster core at a frightening rate. If anyone were to see him now, then they would see the monster core emit a weak amount of light as the energy within started to flow into him like a thick stream. To the naked eye, the energy was surrounding Jian Chen's body while the monster core was rapidly shrinking in Jian Chen's hands. Ever since Jian Chen had broken through to become a saint, there was an unfathomable mystery in his dantian in the form of an azure and violet glow. Because of that, his path of cultivation had become much more difficult than before, and although his absorption rate of the world essence was several times faster than before, he could only absorb a pathetic 1% of it all, the rest of it was being taken by his dantian. So for now he would have to absorb the energy from the monster cores, but if he kept this up, he wouldn't be able to keep up with the consumption rate. After 2 hours, Jian Chen had already absorbed a lot of the energy within the monster cores, but Jian Chen continued to take monster core after monster core out of his space ring and continued to cultivate. He still had plenty of Class 1 monster cores and a few Class 2 monster cores which would last him a couple of days at the very least. Fortunately, his father had also gave him 10 Class 3 monster cores and a single Class 4 monster core. On the second day, the sun had already reached a high point in the sky before Jian Chen finally finished cultivating. By this point, all of his Class 1 monster cores were essentially gone. After realizing the dwindling amount of monster cores in his space belt, Jian Chen gave a long sigh of hopelessness. The 2 glows within his dantian had really made him feel quite distressed. Calming himself, Jian Chen departed from both his room and the restaurant to mingle with the crowded streets. The morning sky was quite clear, and the fiery sun had not yet started to increase the temperature of the weather by a large amount. With a warm ray of light, everyone felt quite comfortable instead. On the busy streets, a few mercenaries were hurrying along while a few peddlers were slowly cruising along. Jian Chen eventually arrived at the mercenary union. He had already put in some thought about which job he wanted to take, so he would first need to become a mercenary. Chapter 69. First-class mercenary throughout the Tianyuan continent. In each city of every country, the mercenary union would always be in the core of the city. And right next to the mercenary union would always be a few small banks. White Cloud City was only a second-class city, but it covered a large area of land. Jian Chen had walked for an entire 30 minutes before finally arriving at a bustling street at the center of the city. Right in front of him was a 20-meter-tall building that towered over the other buildings. This was the Mercenary Union. The Mercenary Union's building was rather large and was constructed to resemble a giant magical beast. At the entrance of the building, a constant flow of all sorts of mercenaries went in and out. Jian Chen entered the Mercenary Union, and although this was the first time he had been to a place like this, however, since he had wanted to become an experienced mercenary, he had read up on about stuff like this in the academy library. The Mercenary Union had many people inside, and the business window had a long queuing line. All of the sales windows were filled with people trying to hand in their missions. Yet in the deepest part of the building, there was a mercenary enrollment window with a cold and desolate ambience. Jian Chen walked up to that window and said, "Hello, I would like to enlist as a mercenary." The person in charge of this window was an old man who looked to be around 60 years old. Although he was old, His entire face was red and his eyes shined brightly with emotion. The elderly man indifferently looked at Jian Chen and flatly said, "To become a mercenary, one first must be a saint. Have you reached that level yet?" "I have already reached the saint level," Jian Chen answered. The elder sized Jian Chen up before handing over a piece of paper and asking, "What's your name?" "Jian Chen." Jian Chen obviously didn't want to use the name Chongyang Xiang Tian when he was trying to hide himself, so he instead used his original name from his previous life as his new moniker. "How old are you this year?" the man asked. Hearing this, Jian Chen gave the question some thought. 20 years old. Jian Chen couldn't possibly state his true age since a saint at the age of 15 was a very rare sight in the Tianyuan continent. If he had stated his true age, it might have brought forth trouble later that he did not need. Although many people knew how talented Jian Chen was in Kargath Academy, only a few people like the headmaster and the vice-headmaster knew his true age. A 20-year-old was the normal age for one to be a saint, and since his physical growth had long since outstripped the others, no one would think otherwise if he said he was 20. With his current appearance, there was almost no difference between a regular 20-year-old and himself. "What degree of strength have you reached?" The man began to write on the piece of paper with a pen. "Primary saint," Jian Chen said. The rest of the process to become a mercenary was rather simple. After paying the tax of 1 silver coin, Jian Chen had officially become a mercenary. He took his mercenary badge, which was that of the lowest rank since he was only a primary saint. After collecting his badge, Jian Chen didn't bother to stay behind at the mercenary union. He instead quickly left the building and asked for directions to a medicine shop. Although the Tianyuan continent had radiant saint masters who could heal a wide variety of injuries, their numbers were incredibly small. Because of this, the status of any single radiant saint master was very high, especially for mercenaries, who would be hard-pressed to be able to invite a radiant saint master into their group. Only the biggest and strongest groups could successfully invite one. Those who were alone or weren't strong enough would find it impossible to enjoy the benefits a radiant saint master would bring unless they paid extensive amounts of money. With an uncountable amount of mercenaries on the Tianyuan continent, there were also an equally uncountable amount of injured people every day. Since the supply of radiant saint masters did not meet the demand of those who needed them, a new method of using drugs and herbs was created to combat injuries. Using these medicines was vastly inferior to the healing capabilities of a radiant saint master, but it was widely accepted by mercenaries. This was because aside from the high-grade drugs, the normal medicines were very cheap. The medicine store wasn't small and was crowded inside. It was not at all like the mercenary union, which had soundproofed walls all around. While in the mercenary union, all of the mercenaries there would loudly shout amongst each other to be heard. In the medicine store, people could easily converse with each other. The medicine store had many long lines of people. After sweeping a glance around the shop, Jian Chen finally found a line with relatively few people and waited. "Might I ask what you want to order?" Finally it was Jian Chen's turn. He was enthusiastically greeted by the person behind the counter. "I'll need a few herbs. Do you have them in stock?" Jian Chen asked. The assistant looked at Jian Chen with an odd stare. This was the first time he had seen a person not come in to buy medicine for their wounds. Instead, this person was buying herbs. Despite the curiosity he had towards Jian Chen, the assistant replied, "Of course we sell them. I don't know what the honored customer wants, but whatever is in the store is for sale. I need some qilin grass, rubbing grass, sweet grass, skeleton grass, sawtooth grass, antelope flower, root flower, lilies and turtle tubers. Do you have these?" Jian Chen named almost 10 different types of herbs. The assistant immediately nodded. "We do. These herbs are very common and are not pricey at all. We have them all, but I don't know how much the honored customer wants." Jian Chen had a happy smile on his face. He took out a gold coin and placed it onto the counter as he said, "Give me a few of every item." These herbs were all extremely common goods. A single gold coin was enough to buy a cartful of them. Seeing the gold coin on the counter, the man smiled brightly. "Okay, please wait for one moment, honored guest. I'll bring them to you in a moment." With that said, he entered the back room to gather the materials. After paying for the herbs he needed, Jian Chen left the store and headed outside of the city. He arrived 10 miles outside of the city walls and entered into the small forest. There, he dug a few mounds of earth and plucked some tree leaves. He then stored them within his space belt and walked back to White Cloud City. After returning to White Cloud City, Jian Chen purchased a new set of ordinary clothes and ducked into an uninhabited alleyway that was hidden by the general populace. After looking left and right to check if the coast was clear, he took out a small bunch of each herb he had bought earlier. He first grinded the herbs up into a fine powder using his hands and feet, before mixing it with the water he collected. Adding to the mixture some of the soft mud and leaves, he grinded it into powder as well. He continued to mix it before squeezing out some of the residual juice. Jian Chen took the result of this juice and immediately smeared it onto his face. Quickly, Jian Chen lifted his head. The complete transformation of his face could clearly be seen. At this moment, Jian Chen's looked entirely different. Even a person who was familiar with his appearance wouldn't be able to recognize him now. For all intents and purposes, Jian Chen was now a completely different person. His previously handsome looks had become average, and even his eyebrows and eyelashes had been altered to become shorter. The only features that hadn't changed were his pair of alluring eyes and his weak-looking figure. Jian Chen didn't stop there. The silver light wind sword appeared in his hands. He suddenly placed the sword on the back of his waist as his waist-length hair blowing slightly into the air. With a silver flash of light, the light wind sword quickly cut through his long hair with a speed that was almost hard to see with the naked eye. His hair was now at his shoulders. He changed into a new set of clothes from his previously luxurious set of clothes made from hand-spun silk. It was quite the change going from the finest silk to coarse leather. By this point, there was nothing about Jian Chen that would remind even those who knew him best of the original Jian Chen. Jian Chen took another few moments to ensure he hadn't overlooked anything to perfect his new appearance. Satisfied, he immediately burned his old clothes in a fire and exited the alley. Once again entering the mercenary union, Jian Chen walked towards the mission place. The mission hall in the mercenary union split its missions into 5 grades. S, A, B, C, and D. The highest grade was S, and the lowest was D. At the same time, the mercenaries were also split into these same 5 categories. At the moment, Jian Chen was only a D-ranked mercenary, and so he could only take on D-ranked missions. A mercenary's rank was determined by the amount of missions accomplished, their honor and strength. A-D-ranked mercenaries had to be at least saints, while C-ranked mercenaries had the power of great saints at the very minimum. With this system, S-ranked mercenaries had to reach the strength and honor of Earth Saint Masters. Even if one had the same strength as an Earth Saint Master, if they didn't have the same amount of reputation, then they wouldn't be considered an S-ranked mercenary. Therefore, this mercenary grading system had no shortcuts. D-ranked missions were bountiful, but the majority of them were very boring. The majority of them were about finding lost items, or to help a store buy and deliver their items to another store. None of the missions were of any interest to Jian Chen. Right now, Jian Chen only wanted a mission that would let him leave the Jesson Kingdom because he knew the Hua Yun sect was a major power in the kingdom. Although he had completely changed his looks, there was no guarantee that a person wouldn't discover his real identity and set off the Hua Yun sect's pursuit to capture him. Just in case he accidentally revealed himself to the Hua Yun sect by mistake, it would be best for him to leave the Jesson Kingdom to a place where the Hua Yun sect had no power. Unfortunately, very few D-ranked missions allowed a mercenary to travel in between countries. Most missions like that were for the higher-ranked mercenaries and were usually never distributed to a D-ranker. So when Jian Chen had looked at the entire mission list for D-ranking mercenaries, he didn't see a single mission that would take him outside the country. Inwardly sighing, Jian Chen left the mercenary union. If he wanted to leave the Jesson Kingdom, he would need to rely on the cover of caravans. Otherwise, if he were to travel alone, he would be assaulted by a group of robbers that even he would most likely have trouble with. But even if he didn't meet any robbers, the border fortress was a place Jian Chen wouldn't be able to bypass with ease. Chapter 70. Leaving Jesson Kingdom. After leaving the mercenary union, Jian Chen walked towards the marketplace. With such a wide variety of goods being displayed, there was an equal variety of armed forces guarding it as people traded. With their presence, no one feared having their wares stolen. But when Jian Chen arrived, there were already people busily trading while others were streaming in and out of the area. All sorts of magical beasts were being ridden by the guards, though some of them were just regular horses. Horses were very common in the Tianyuan continent, but while they were the most common type of transportation, they were also the most mundane. At that moment, a peddler walked by Jian Chen's side with an armload of goods. Holding out his hand, Jian Chen asked the peddler, "Fellow brother, might I ask if you know of any traders leaving the Jesson Kingdom?" The trader looked at Jian Chen with suspicion before pointing towards a big caravan. That caravan is preparing to leave the Jesson kingdom. Jian Chen followed the youth's finger with his eye and saw 10 caravans grouped together. Surrounding the caravans was a large group of mercenaries protecting the items, while a middle-aged man wearing a luxurious-looking robe was commanding the people to load up the items onto the caravan. With only a single glance, Jian Chen knew that this middle-aged man was the one responsible for the caravans. Immediately walking on over, he asked the man, "Uncle, might I ask if your caravans are leaving Jesson Kingdom?" Hearing Jian Chen, the middle-aged man turned around to take a look at him. "Why do you ask?" Laughing, Jian Chen said, "Uncle, if your caravans are leaving Jesson Kingdom, might I join you? Although my strength is not all that strong, I am still a mercenary nonetheless. I don't need a reward for this either. How about it?" The middle-aged man looked relieved at Jian Chen's last sentence and said, "Fine. However, you must stick close to us during the trip. Also, any roadside fares must be paid by you and won't be compensated for by us. Lastly, if we are attacked, then you must help protect the group and fight together with us." On the Tian-Yuan continent, most of the weaker mercenaries would usually either form their own large group, or join a caravan group in order to travel from kingdom to kingdom. Since the roads connecting the kingdoms were long and dangerous, there was a very high chance of encountering highwaymen. Ambushes from magical beasts were also a common occurrence, and in some areas, those attacks happened frequently. Because of this, every caravan would welcome a mercenary's presence with wide arms, and generally wouldn't refuse anyone. After all, even one man could add to the overall strength, and could help protect someone's life. Jian Chen didn't hesitate at all to agree to the man's conditions. "Our caravan will depart in an hour, so go make your preparations." With that said, the man didn't pay any more attention to Jian Chen and resumed commanding the transporters to work. Afterwards, Jian Chen headed towards the White Cloud city stables and spent 50 gold coins to buy a single horse. Leading the horse back, he patiently waited for the caravan to depart. An hour quickly passed as Jian Chen mounted his horse and followed the caravans from behind. The mercenaries that were originally hired to protect the caravan sent many inquisitive looks at him, but none bothered to talk to him. Since there were 3 caravan groups that combined into one, there were naturally 3 groups of mercenaries. Aside from those 3 groups, there were also many mercenaries going by themselves. It was because of the unknown dangers that the caravans had to group together both themselves and their mercenaries, resulting in a total of about 500 people. It was even normal for one to recognize a familiar face. Soon they left the city gates. Although the caravan representative had a few bodyguards and mercenaries, he didn't stay at the gates for long, and immediately ordered the caravans to move out once the negotiations were over. One moment. At that moment, before everyone could move, an armored man came down from the city towers with a scroll of paper. The middle-aged man crossed the city gates and handed the scroll to one of the bodyguards. "Take this portrait and stick it to the city gates. Then find the best portrait master and send him to me. I want him to duplicate this portrait and post it everywhere in the city. If anyone can find the person described on the portrait, capture him, and if there's any resistance, kill him." "Yes, sir." A soldier took the scroll and immediately tacked it to the city wall. The picture on the portrait is a wanted criminal in the Jesson Kingdom. Take a good look now. Look for this person in every single city you stop at. By all means, you must not let the criminal get away. Do you understand?" The man repeated with a commanding tone that could be heard clearly even from far away. As the bodyguard posted the portrait onto the city gates, everyone glanced at the figure on it. The person looked to be no younger than 16 years old, and no older than 20. Although the person looked very young, his looks were handsome and actually looked very lifelike despite it being a drawing. Whoever had drawn this portrait was a true master of art. After posting the portrait, the man waved his arm at the caravan representative. "That'll be all, you can leave now." With no further interruptions, the caravan began to move once more. However, the guards at the city gates had already went from 10 in number to 100. Every single one of them would check each person as they entered or exited the gates, and then compared them to the person in the portrait. When Jian Chen was about to exit the gates, he saw the portrait on the gates, and his eyes hardened. The person on the portrait was of his original appearance. Seeing this, Jian Chen couldn't help but feel some fear in his heart regarding the Hua Yun sect. This city had been countless of miles away from Lore City. He had only left Lore City yesterday and arrived at White Cloud City just last night. Yet not only did the Hua Yun sect perfectly capture his appearance onto a portrait, but they had also been able to quickly send out the portraits to a city thousands of miles away. This type of efficiency made any person quake in fear, and Jian Qin doubted that the Hua Yun sect had only sent out portraits to White Cloud City. Right now, he feared almost every single city within the Jesson Kingdom had warrants of his capture. Jian Qin secretly rejoiced at his decision to change his appearance. Otherwise, he would have been hard-pressed to escape White Cloud City. As Jian Qin rode his horse forward, the two soldiers at the gates scrutinized him with a heavy stare. However, Jian Qin had already changed his appearance. He was completely different from before. If people who had been familiar with him wouldn't be able to recognize him, then how would some strangers be able to find out who he was? With no more hindrances, Jian Qin mixed in with the other mercenaries and departed from White Cloud City in a long line. The final destination for the three caravans was the neighboring country, Blue Wind Kingdom. But because the caravans had many precious goods in them, they were going at a slow pace. Although the border fort wasn't too far away, it would take them 2 or 3 days of walking to reach the border, and crossing into the Blue Wind Kingdom would require another half-month. Jian Qin looked at the grand caravan. It wasn't using regular horses to pull, but rather 4 Class 1 magical beasts specially bred for this purpose. Surrounding the magical beasts were a few mercenaries riding on top of their own magical beasts. None of them looked weak at all. The man Jian Qin had talked to earlier was there as well. It seemed that all of them were protecting the caravan as well. Jian Qin had quietly figured out that within the middle caravan was the boss, if not an important person. This was because this was a luxurious caravan, and still had 2 other caravans by its side. It took around 4 days for the group of caravans to reach the border fort, which was a long wall that spanned for countless of miles. It was 50 meters tall and 20 meters thick. From afar, this great wall looked like a long dragon that made people shake in awe. Jian Qin looked at the wall in front of him as the shade covered him. Under the protection of the wall, the setting sun was completely blocked, and the area in front of the wall was completely covered in darkness. This sight was enough to make people who had never seen this sight before shake in awe, as they felt like the wall was some frightening and profound force. This was the first time Jian Qin had ever seen the Jesson Kingdom's wall. There was awe in Jian Qin's mind as he looked. In his previous world, he had seen many walls, but none of them could compare to this. The biggest wall he had seen was 20 meters tall, but this wall in front of him was 50 meters tall. It was like comparing an adult to a child. What a great wall! I can't even imagine how long it took for them to build a wall of this size. Jian Qin sighed in admiration. Hearing what he said, the mercenary riding right next to Jian Qin stifled his laughter. A wall of this size is normal in the Tianyuan continent. Practically every kingdom has a wall of this caliber. The mercenary looked at Jian Qin and said, "If you haven't been to any of the 3 great empires, then let me tell you. Each one of the walls have a height of at least 100 meters and a thickness of 50 meters. These small city walls can't even compare." Jian Qin turned around to look at the mercenary who spoke to him. He looked to be around 20 years old and had a sun-tanned face. With his coarse leather clothes, the man looked to be quite ordinary. "When there's a chance, I'll definitely go check out the 3 great empires." Jian Qin laughed. The roads connecting the 3 great empires are quite long and dangerous. At the same time, magical beasts run rampant there, so it's not that easy to travel in between the empires. The mercenary said. Chapter 71. Mu Yun. Jian Qin let loose a gentle smile as he cupped his hands in greeting. It seems brother has seen many suns while traveling the Tianyuan continent. The mercenary returned his smile. It wasn't all that long, just a few years, that's all. Compared to those that have left their homes to travel for 10 to 100 years, I am still green. This brother here doesn't know what to call you. Jian Qin said. My name is Mu Yun. What's your name? The mercenary spoke with great enthusiasm. I'm called Jian Qin. Jian Qin replied. He had already decided to use the name Jian Qin in the future on the Tianyuan continent. Following this, Jian Qin and Mu Yun started to converse, discussing several interesting issues on Tianyuan continent. Although this was the first time Jian Qin was traveling the Tianyuan continent, he had read plenty of books regarding the continent back in the Kargath library and had grown familiar with a few things including history. Mu Yun, on the other hand, had traversed the Tianyuan continent for a few years, so his experience could be said to be quite ample. The two had actually complemented each other nicely, and so as they enthusiastically talked to each other, They unconsciously formed a close bond with each other. As the caravan got closer to the gates of the border fort, Jian Chen noticed a portrait tacked to the side of one of the gates. On the portrait, the name Chongyang Xiang Tian was inscribed on it with a generous reward printed below it. If people had any hints or clues to Chongyang Xiang Tian's whereabouts that proved to be true, then they would be awarded with 1,000 purple coins. If their information led to the capture of the person, then they would be rewarded with another 4,000 purple coins. A gold coin was enough to feed a small household of 3 for over a month, and a purple coin was the equivalent to 100 gold coins. So 1,000 purple coins was a generous sum of money to any mercenary. With such a tidy sum, any mercenary, or anyone for that matter, would be able to buy a nice home and spend the rest of their lives without any more financial worries. It was easy to say that this reward was so irresistible that no one could turn it down. The best reward people could hope for from traveling would be to capture Chongyang Xiang Tian. If they could capture and hand him to the Huayun sect, then they would be able to enjoy a prize of 10,000 purple coins. Seeing the generous prize for his capture, Jian Chen's normally emotionless eyes flashed with a cold glare. Huayun sect, you really do think highly of me to offer so great a reward and label me as a wanted criminal throughout the Jesson Kingdom. To think that you're even using the mercenary union to try to find me. Jian Chen inwardly sneered, however, he felt a small pang of hopelessness. On the Tianyuan continent, strength determined everything, and his own strength was currently insufficient. Because of the Huayun sect, he had to forsake his name, his image, his home and his kingdom. In regards with such a predicament, not only was he unable to do anything, but even one of the 4 major clans in Lore City, his Chongyang clan, was powerless to stop the Huayun sect. AI. Jian Chen sighed. At that moment, he could not help but recall the image of his mother's sorrowfully crying face when he left. After thinking back to that, Jian Chen's eyes softened momentarily before rapidly becoming firm. After that moment, he had promised himself that he would dedicate himself to cultivation and improving his strength. Otherwise, under the great power of the Huayun sect, he would never be able to return to the Jesson Kingdom and see his mother again. More importantly, he would never be able to feel motherly love ever again. The previous Jian Chen was an orphan and had never known what maternal love was. The heavens had not only granted him a new shot at life, but also a blessed family life. Jian Chen had treasured the feelings he felt from his relationship with his mother. Even those who were born into a happy family wouldn't be able to experience what Jian Chen had felt. As someone who lived an entire life in isolation, he had always desired family. But because he had always been in solitude, his heart had only known what it felt like to be alone. Next to the empty gates, roughly 200 soldiers stood by and stared down every single person that entered and exited the city. Whenever someone had an unclear face, they would be stopped by the soldiers and be compared with the portrait before finally being allowed to continue. Although the soldiers had blocked many strong mercenaries, none were in a hurry. This was because outside of Jesson Kingdom's boundary, the fort had over 10,000 soldiers and didn't lack in experts at all. So if a battle broke out, it would be obvious who would be the loser. The doors to the fort were gigantic. Even if 5 caravans were to enter side by side, they would not block the road at all. As Jian Chen and his caravans slowly walked forward, another smaller caravan sped up from behind. As they saw the gates of the fort approach, they started to speak. Who exactly is this guy in the portrait, and how is it that he's being chased by everyone? I didn't think that even Jesson Kingdom's border forts would have this portrait tacked up as well. It looks like this guy broke countless laws. I've already been to 3 cities and saw this portrait posted everywhere. Even the mercenary union has put out a warrant for his arrest. That's right, this guy is definitely someone who broke a few major laws, or annoyed someone of great influence. Right now, the mercenary union has already given him an A-ranked bounty with no restriction to the rank required to take it. So even a D-ranked mercenary could cash in on this bounty. Exactly, the commission for this is extremely high. As long as we have information on his location, that's already 1,000 purple coins. And if they capture him with this information, then that's another 4,000 purple coins. A few thousand is nothing. If we personally capture and bring him to the Huayun sect, that's 10,000 purple coins. 10,000 coins, the thought is terrifying. I wouldn't be able to spend 10,000 purple coins in a single lifetime. Hearing the merchants talk about the portrait, Mu Yun turned to Jian Chen and laughed. I don't know what type of crime this Chongyang Xiang Tian committed in order to have the Huayun sect spend so much money to go after him, but it can't possibly be a justifiable sentence, since the portrait there says he is only at the level of a primary saint. How strange, how could a primary saint garner so much hate from the Hua Yun sect? Could it be that this Chongyang Xiang Tian got caught peeking at the Hua Yun sect's daughter while she took a bath? Hearing Mu Yun talk, Jian Chen could only laugh. He helplessly looked at Mu Yuan. Brother Mu Yun, I have lived in the Jessen kingdom for over a dozen years and more, and heard much about the Hua Yun sect. However, I have only heard about the sect leader having a son, not a daughter. So sneakily watching his daughter take a bath doesn't seem to be possible. Mu Yun threw a dirty look at Jian Chen. What do you know? Who says the Hua Yun sect leader has no daughter? This can't possibly be confirmed. Maybe she's hidden from the rest of the world. Jian Chen helplessly shook his head, deciding in his heart to no longer argue with Mu Yun about whether the Hua Yun sect leader really had a daughter or not. The caravan didn't run into any obstructions at the fort, and Jian Chen's appearance easily passed through without trouble. No one could tell his looks were fake since Jian Chen was an expert of disguise. So even though he had only used a few common herbs, his disguise was flawless. Moreover, this disguise technique was something that was passed down to Jian Chen as he wandered about in his previous world. It looked simple, but was actually quite profound, and couldn't be learned easily. In this world, this type of method was not yet invented, so it was natural no one would think twice about it. As long as his face didn't tear up, then no one would be able to find out. After passing through the border fort, they were greeted with plains that stretched farther than the eye could see. There were very few people, and the road only had a few caravans on it. This was the road that was not under any control from the kingdoms, and was just an unregulated chaotic piece of land. Robbers and bandits roamed around these parts, so caravans generally grouped together with others and hired strong mercenaries to protect them. This stretch of land was very large as well. A single day of traveling only got them a quarter of the way there. If they wanted to reach the Blue Wind Kingdom, they would also have to pass through a mountain range to get to the border fort. With the speed the caravans were going, if they wanted to reach the fort, they would need at least 10 days. Even if the road was flat, they wouldn't be able to go any faster, since the caravans were burdened with large carts of goods. As the day grew dark, the caravans stopped to set up for the night. The mercenaries set up camp around the caravans, while the caravan drivers unloaded fodder for the horses to eat. A plume of smoke billowed up from the camps as a few of the mercenaries sat down to roast some magical beast meat or some pre-made food for them to eat. However, not all of them sat together. A few of the mercenaries stood off by the side and began to eat their own rations. Jian Chen took out a tent from his space belt and then looked for a dry and flat piece of land to set it up. Since he wasn't a part of any mercenary group, he was not able to use the provisions provided for those that were hired. Jian Chen had to take responsibility for anything he used without any assistance from the caravans. Right as Jian Chen finished pitching his tent, Mu Yun suddenly walked up to Jian Chen and said, "Jian Chen, it seems like you only joined this caravan halfway through. Where do you plan to go?" Jian Chen nodded and said, "I want to go to the Blue Wind Kingdom. What about you, brother Mu Yun?" Mu Yun laughed and said, "I wish to go the Cage Kingdom, which means I'll have to pass through the Blue Wind Kingdom." As he spoke, his hand also withdrew a tent from his space belt and he began to set it up not too far away from Jian Chen's tent. Chapter 72. Boundless Bandits. As dusk arrived, Jian Chen finished his rations and went into his tent. With a Class 1 monster core in hand, he started to cultivate. Now that he was traveling the Tian Yuan continent, there would be dangers lurking around every corner. This meant that he had to be strong in order to stay safe. Thus, Jian Chen didn't dare to squander even a second in order to increase his strength. Not only that, but he knew that if he grew stronger, then he would be able to return to the Jessen kingdom and reunite with his family without fear of the Hua Yun sect. Otherwise, if he dared to show his face there, he would be chased to the ends of the earth by the sect. Right now the outside was relatively peaceful. There was only the occasional sound of footsteps being heard as a few of the mercenaries patrolled around the campsite. The time quietly passed as it became late. At that moment, all of the mercenaries in their tents were sound asleep, and the mercenaries that were patrolling were drowsy to the point of being in an unfocused state. Just then, a dark blade flashed. It traveled under the cover of the night and silently slashed the neck of one of the patrolling mercenaries. This dark flash was clearly the result of an assassin's power, and with a soundless gurgle, the mercenary fell to the ground dead. The dark flash had moved through the air silently and quickly. No one could sense this blade coming. Since the campgrounds were wide, and the target had been a lone mercenary standing in a remote place. There was no way anyone could possibly notice his death before he fell to the ground. Right as the first mercenary fell to the ground, countless dark flashes flew out towards the camp and killed all of the mercenaries patrolling a bit far from camp. Jian Chen wasn't too far away from the campsite, and so when the mercenaries fell to the ground, there was one that fell only 30 meters away from Jian Chen. The crossed-legged Jian Chen's ear shook from the sound he heard as his eyes abruptly flew open. Looking around, Jian Chen bent forward to open the tent flap just a crack to see what was happening outside. Just as Jian Chen opened up the flap to his tent to check up on what was happening outside, another flash of light could be seen as it shot through a patrolling mercenary. Like the others, this man also fell to the ground without a sound. Jian Chen's eyes widened in surprise at this sight. It was clear to him that the caravan was under attack, but with his previous experience, he did not panic. Roaring loudly from his tent, he yelled, "Everyone be careful, we are under attack." Jian Chen let loose a loud roar that could be heard clearly throughout the campsite. With his warning, the previously peacefully quiet campsite erupted into noise as countless mercenaries came bursting out from their tents. In just a short moment, hundreds of mercenaries making a racket had appeared in the previously undisturbed camp. Jian Chen's words were common to all those that had traveled throughout the Tianyuan continent. Those who lived by their weapons were extremely sensitive to sound, and so when they heard Jian Chen, they immediately came charging out of their tents. However, as everyone came rushing from their tents, they looked around themselves and could only see their own mercenaries without any signs of an enemy. An enemy? Where's the enemy? Who was the one that yelled, "I don't see anyone"? Where's the enemy? Who's the motherfucker that cried wolf? Many of the mercenaries began to cry out loud in anger. If they found the guy who cried wolf, then he wouldn't be let off easily. Not good, Captain Lang Tian, the sentry du Mulan has died. Just as many of the mercenaries were cursing out loud, another yell came crying loudly over the others, causing many to turn their heads. Hearing that, every single mercenary turned towards the cry in dead silence. At the same time, another 3 flashes of light came flying through towards the group, and slammed straight into 3 mercenaries' chests. The 3 mercenaries that were hit didn't even have the opportunity to even cry out before they slumped to the ground. But before they could even hit the floor, another 3 streaks of lights flew out and claimed the lives of another 3 mercenaries. The streaks of black light never ceased to fly out towards the mercenaries. Under the guise of the night, it was hard for the people to figure out where they were coming from or where they were aimed at. Since the light was shooting at a fast pace, a dozen mercenaries had already succumbed to the attack before anyone could even react. At this time, a mercenary finally cried out in terror, "Be careful, enemies are at us." But before he could finish his sentence, a streak of light flew towards him and killed him. "Everyone scatter and take cover," another mercenary yelled. It was a large middle-aged man with a scar on his face. 2 red hammers materialized in his hands as he charged towards the direction of where the attack came from. "Captain Lang Tian, be careful." Watching the man charge towards the direction of the enemy, many of the mercenaries cried out in concern. As the man charged ahead, a few dozen of the stronger mercenaries began to follow his lead, and started to rush towards the source of the attacks. But the streaks of light continued to fly out. This time they had changed targets and began to hit those mercenaries that were starting to come towards them. Although this was a hasty charge without knowing all the information, these dozen mercenaries were not weak. The still charging Captain Lang Tian swung out with his twin red hammers and lit up the area around them like a striking lantern. As he saw 2 flashes of light head towards him, Lang Tian sneered and swung out his hammers, smashing them away from him. As the 2 hit each other, Lang Tian's hammers completely smashed through the rays of light. Silently, the light disappeared. Although they were strong enough to take another person's life, they weren't strong enough to withstand an actual attack. The mercenaries behind Lang Tian weren't weak either, and without fear, their saint weapons began to form and destroy the black lights that were aimed at them. At that time, another situation had occurred. An ear-piercing whistle broke the silence. As the mercenaries turned their heads towards the sound, they could only see a large concentration of arrows flying at them, like a swarm of locusts. Seeing the amount of arrows, a few dozen of the mercenaries immediately stopped their charge and took cover. Ding 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 ding. The arrows immediately landed against their saint weapons, creating a cacophony of sound. Lang Tian and a few other mercenaries didn't bother to stop their charge. Faced with a storm of arrows, many of the mercenaries only snarled loudly and used their saint force to completely enwrap themselves. Although the layer was very thin, its defensive power was extremely strong. These arrows were shrugged off as they fell to the ground, completely unable to pierce through the protective layering. "Fellow brothers, let's kill." Just as the mercenaries were about to follow the initial charge into the enemy grounds, a clear voice shouted out from the darkness of the night. The cry shook the heavens, and with it came a faint, dark shadow rushing towards the mercenaries. "The bandits have come out. Ready your arrows." Within the mercenary camp, a mercenary cried out to warn them as many of them started to notch their bows. Aiming at the blurs, they waited for the right distance before they fired. Jian Chen stood on the outskirts of the battle, his eyes hardening as he looked at the incoming shadows. Although they were still relatively far from the campsite and the night had rendered visibility to almost zero, Jian Chen could count out a few hundred shadows. This number wasn't any lower than the mercenaries' own number. Moreover, with the recent storm of arrows, a few of the mercenaries had been killed, further decreasing their numbers. Fire! By this point, the bandits had already entered firing range. With the command of one person, the 100 arrows were released into the air by the mercenaries and flew towards the bandits with an ear-piercing whistle. Amongst the bandits were a few strong ones, but the majority of them were fairly weak, and so a few dozen of them fell victim to the storm of arrows. 3 more streaks of light came flying out silently from behind the bandits and took the lives of 3 of the mercenary archers. Those 3 streaks of light left small finger-sized holes in them as they fell to the ground. The frequency of the streaks of light was high and always came in groups of 3. In a short while, a total of 9 archers fell dead. Seeing the wounds on the mercenaries' corpses, a middle-aged man called out, "Everyone be careful, there's a dark attribute saint amongst the bandits." As he spoke, another 3 rays of light came flying out towards the man that had just spoke. The middle-aged man was by no means weak. His face hardened as a shiny axe appeared in his right hand, which he then used to chop the streaks of black light. Bang! The streak of black light clashed with the middle-aged man's axe, causing a giant explosion of sound before they disappeared. The man shook slightly as his face hardened. Damn it, the enemies have 3 dark-attributed saints who are specialized archers. In this area, only the boundless bandits have this type of power. Vice Captain Liu, what are you saying? Could it be these are the boundless bandits? Good heavens, these are the boundless bandits. What a disaster to think we came across the boundless bandits. Chapter 73. Boundless Bandit, 2. Upon hearing the name Boundless Bandits, every mercenary's face fell. Boundless Bandits. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together. He wasn't very familiar with this bandit group. When he had read the books in both Chongyang Mansion and Kargath Library, the only thing he was able to learn about the Boundless Bandits was that they were a very strong bandit group that had existed for 200 years already. The Boundless Bandits were a strong group from the very beginning. They wandered about the borders of several kingdoms and were any caravan's worst nightmare. The Boundless Bandits were ruthless, and whenever they robbed merchants, they never left any survivors. Countless mercenaries died due to the Boundless Bandits, and the Boundless Bandits had occasionally attacked many villages and even some minor cities. In the past, 2 Class 3 cities had been plundered by them, and a Class 2 city had suffered tremendous damage from them. With every village they massacred, it further enhanced their reign of terror and caused merchants to fear traveling to faraway places. This in turn incurred great losses for some of the major kingdoms. At that time, the 4 great kingdoms, the Jessen Kingdom, the Blue Moon Kingdom, the Blue Wind Kingdom, and the Var Kingdom had finally discovered the main hideout of the Boundless Bandits, and sent their soldiers to annihilate them. Unfortunately, the Boundless Bandits had power beyond what was anticipated, and although the 4 great kingdoms had succeeded in the end, they had suffered disastrous casualties. After a few unsuccessful attempts, the 4 great kingdoms each sent their strongest expert to fight the Boundless Bandits at their main base, Boundless Mountain. Those 4 experts came to Boundless Mountain and fought so hard that the entire mountain shook and split open. The explosions of battle lasted for 1 day and 1 night before gradually stopping. Sometime during the battle, the 6 peaks of the mountain had caved in. When the experts from the 4 great kingdom had returned, their faces were not a pretty sight. They didn't say anything and left quickly. Soon after, the commander of the mission to annihilate the Boundless Bandits had immediately received an order from the king for all the troops to retreat from Boundless Mountain. Although no one had personally seen what the experts from the 4 great kingdoms had done inside the mountain, even those without a brain could guess what events had transpired. This result was something the mercenaries and merchants had a hard time accepting, and so as a result, the Boundless Bandits' reputation skyrocketed. To some mercenaries and merchants, The boundless bandits had become a mythical figure that was feared by quite a few of the neighboring kingdoms. However, there was still one good thing. After the experts had fought them on Boundless Mountain, the boundless bandits' activities decreased drastically. Even though many merchants and mercenaries still died by their hand every year, it didn't happen as often as in the past. It only occurred once every 2 months, and their methods weren't as violent as before. This gave the merchants plenty of opportunities. The only downside was that they couldn't predict the times when the boundless bandits would attack. Thus, even if some of the caravans wanted to travel at specific times in order to avoid the bandits, it was an impossible task. Motherfucker, the boundless bandits aren't anything. This one will chop them down like grass. A mercenary cried out with hatred as he charged towards the boundless bandits without a trace of fear in his eyes. Aside from him, all the other mercenaries had looked at the incoming boundless bandits with looks of extreme hatred as well. The boundless bandits had killed numerous mercenaries and merchants, and even some of their family members and close friends had been murdered by these bandits. So in their hearts, the mercenaries' initial fears had been overtaken by their intense hatred. As travelers who depended on their strengths in order to survive as mercenaries, their murderous nature overtook their normally upright morality, and made them into men who feared nothing, not even death. 10 years ago, my own father was killed by the hands of the boundless bandits. Today, I will take revenge for my father. A 20-year-old mercenary glared at the incoming bandits with blood-red eyes. Grief and rage had consumed him along with hatred. Another older man around the age of looked at them with fierce killing intent as he said through his teeth, "The boundless bandits killed my brother 5 years ago. Even if I sacrifice my life today, I'll take the life of at least one of them to serve as the funerary mat in revenge for my brother." The black streaks of light continued to come at them without pause. Even now, a few of the mercenary archers were still falling prey to the strange ray of light. While a few of the mercenaries tried to take cover, the others continued to fire arrows at the incoming bandits. As the bandits got closer and closer, many of the mercenaries became more frantic. The amount of bandits rushing at them had a major influence on the mercenaries, and scared many of them into retreating. Their rebellious spirit was gone, since not everyone was willing to fight back. There were some that were more cowardly in the mercenary ranks. Seeing how the mercenaries were slowly losing control of the situation, a middle-aged man began to worry and shouted, "Do not panic. These are only a small portion of the boundless bandits. They're no stronger than us. As long as we work together, we can defeat them. Otherwise, we will all die together. Brothers, for our lives, we must come together." Hearing the middle-aged man, even the most cowardly mercenaries had felt some courage return to their hearts. If they wanted to survive, they would need to fight. Their fierce desire to survive forced them to abandon their cowardly nature, and they were now prepared to risk their lives. The mercenaries tried to think of any possible ways to dodge the dark streaks of light while continuing to shoot at the bandits. After a good 100 bandits were killed, the boundless bandits finally arrived in front of the mercenaries. By this point, each mercenary had already fired their last arrow, and so they dropped their bows and summoned their saint weapons to engage the boundless bandits in close combat. Ah! Ah! The two sides began to roar, their cries piercing the heavens as their weapons collided against each other. But the mercenaries were still not able to see behind the bandits, and the streaks of black lights were still able to precisely strike at each mercenary without fail. Within a few moments, a dozen mercenaries had fallen. The captain is being stalled by the bandit experts. "Charles, Gus and Aaron Mel, you three follow me. We'll definitely find the hiding spots of the archers." An armored mercenary cried out over the chaos of the moment. Straight after saying that, he leapt over the body of a bandit and charged towards the source of the black streaks. As the armored mercenary charged, the 3 other mercenaries mentioned leapt to follow him. Using the heads of the bandits to block the streaks of black light, they continued onwards. The 4 mercenaries leapt over the fallen bandits. The other bandits standing had no chance against them. Although the boundless bandits were strong enough as a whole to rival kingdoms, this small portion wasn't enough. Moreover, their elite members were already blocked by a few experts during the initial charge, so there weren't any strong bandits remaining to block the 4 mercenaries. Another 3 streaks of light came flying out at the 4 mercenaries. Clearly, the hidden dark attributed archers had figured out the intentions of the mercenaries. Straight after the first 3 streaks were shot, another 3 black streaks came flying straight behind, making it a total of 6 streaks that silently approached the 4 mercenaries. The 4 mercenaries weren't weak and were actually far stronger than the mercenaries on patrol. Each one of them summoned their saint weapons and smashed against the streaks of light with them. When the two collided, the black lights directly dissipated. The mercenaries' paces didn't falter in the slightest as they continued to charge towards the bandit archers. All four of them knew that if they didn't resolve the issues with the archers, then their mercenary group would continue to take on heavy losses. Although the three mercenary groups had several hundred people, their strengths in the mercenary world were all lower-ranked ones. The mercenaries were generally at the level of a saint. Those who were a great saint were very few. There were only a few great saint masters in this group, the three mercenary captains and the vice-captain. However, the four of them were currently engaged in battle with the experts on the bandit side, and did not have time to find the archers. The moment the four mercenaries escaped from view, the streaks of black light stopped as well. Whether or not they had taken care of the archers, they at the very least had gained some precious time for the mercenaries. After all, the black streaks of light were detrimental to the mercenaries, since they couldn't be easily seen under the night. Their travel speeds were also extremely fast, and so the weaker mercenaries would have no way of spotting the lights. With the hidden danger gone, the mercenaries no longer had to protect themselves from any long-ranged attacks. They could now fight against the bandits with 100% of their power and tear them apart. By this point, every single mercenary threw away all fear they had for the boundless bandits. For the sake of surviving, all of them were using their utmost efforts to kill the bandits, only hoping to end up victorious. The battle rose to an ear-deafening point as saint weapons clashed against each other and blood splashed everywhere throughout the battlefield. As the war went on, dozens of people from both sides fell victim to the other side. Jian Chen had also entered the battle, despite using only his saint power. However, his formidable fighting strength was definitely enough to shock anyone. They could only see Jian Chen's use his profound steps to evade the attacks coming from every direction. In his hand, he had only a silver sword that was 1.3 meters long and 2 fingers wide. It constantly flashed in his hand at lightning-fast speeds. His pierces were so fast that only a thin ribbon of silver light would flicker across as he moved. There was no way the naked eye could catch a glimpse of the sword's material form. Jian Chen's sword was not only fast but it was also one that nobody could defend against. Moreover, his swordplay was extremely precise. Every time his sword pierced outwards, he could accurately stab the enemy in the throat, killing the enemy in one attack. There were very few people at the same level of strength as him that could evade Jian Chen's lightning-fast sword. Chapter 74. Fierce battle. Jian Chen was able to fight against his enemies alone. The battlefield around him was filled with desolate screams, and blood splashed everywhere. To Jian Chen, this was already a common sight, so it didn't disturb him in the slightest. Jian Chen continued to stab out with his sword. After every attack another boundless bandit would fall. With his lightning-fast speed, enemies of equal strength weren't able to keep up with Jian Chen's flow for more than 3 moves, and even more of them were instantly killed with only a single blow to the throat. In terms of strength, Jian Chen was lower ranked when compared to the bandits. However, when it came to killing bandits, no one could compare to Jian Chen. In the span of a few minutes, over a few dozen bandits had been killed by him, drenching his light wind sword with blood. Jian Chen's clothes, on the other hand, still maintained their pure cottony white and brown, as not a single splash of blood landed on them. Unknowingly, Jian Chen had penetrated into the core of the bandits. Boundless bandits surrounded him for 20 meters in every direction with no fellow mercenary in sight. The closest few were fighting in small groups of 3 to 5 on the outskirts of the bandits' vanguard. Kill! 3 of the boundless bandits cried as they charged at Jian Chen with a bloodthirsty roar. With a lift of their saint weapons, they slashed down in hopes of chopping Jian Chen in half. Jian Chen immediately flew forward like a speed demon towards one of the incoming bandits. His light wind sword flashed with a blood-red color as it shot towards the bandit's throat. Jian Chen was an expert with the sword. When he made his move he did it fast. The bandits had no time to react. He could only see the bloody flash come towards his neck. Then the next thing he knew, he couldn't breathe. It was almost as if something was blocking his throat, so he couldn't yell either. Immediately, a trickle of blood came flowing from his neck as the bandit fell to the ground without making another sound. Even in his final moments, the bandit didn't realize that he was dying. Perhaps he didn't even know his throat had been pierced by Jian Chen's sword. Because Jian Chen's swordplay was so fast, the bandit didn't have time to react. Moreover, the blade was so thin that he did not even feel pain from the stab. Even after the light wind sword had pierced the bandit's throat, Jian Chen didn't stop moving. The other two bandits had already gotten close, readying their weapons to slash down towards him. Facing the two bandits who were preparing their weapons, Jian Chen did not look panicked at all. With a calm face, he grabbed his sword and used the profound steps to approach the two bandits at rapid speeds. At the same time, the blood-red sword in his hand lashed out and stabbed one of the two bandits in the throat. The light wind sword met no resistance as the stabbed bandit didn't react at all. It pierced deeply through his throat, and with a fluid motion, Jian Chen pulled it out and stabbed the third bandit as well. Every single stab from Jian Chen had been extremely fast. The naked eye wouldn't be able to keep up. No one would be able to avoid his strokes, and so the third bandit would definitely not be able to survive a blow to his throat either. To Jian Chen, killing people was already as common as breathing. Seeing the life escaping from people was nothing uncommon, and he never hesitated over taking a bandit's life. And so the light wind sword continued to fly out towards the bandits. Amongst the fierce clash, no one was safe from this battle. Even the caravan drivers who weren't saints were grouped together with a few mercenaries fending off the bandits. The battle was causing both sides to rapidly lose numbers. Both the bandits and the mercenaries suffered from disastrous casualties. Aside from Jian Chen, who was still completely clean of blood, everyone else was drenched in it. Some were covered head to toe in both blood and wounds. Although the bandits had a higher number of people than the mercenaries, their strength and teamwork were lacking in discipline in comparison to the mercenaries, who had spent a good portion of their time with each other. So when the two fought, despite having superior numbers, the bandits were fighting on equal grounds with the mercenaries. Jian Chen continued to travel back and forth as he dodged attacks from all directions, while stabbing out with his bloody light wind sword towards each bandit's heart and throat. Almost each move was a fatal blow, and for those who did not get hit in one of those two areas, Jian Chen's sword still left severe injuries deep enough to see bone. None of the bandits around him had any way of fighting back against Jian Chen. Most of them couldn't even see his sword move. Whenever the bandits slashed with their weapons, at the most crucial point, Jian Chen would evade the swing. Before they could understand what had just happened, they would all fall to the floor dead. The amount of bandits killed at Jian Chen's hands was growing in number. Gradually, all of the bandits were starting to recognize Jian Chen's strength, and began to distance themselves from him. After all, in such a tense situation like this, no one was willing to send themselves to die that foolishly. Your Grace has such amazing skill. Allow me to test it out. At that moment, a deep voice growled out before a cyan-colored ray of light shot towards Jian Chen rapidly. Feeling the energy leak away from the cyan streak of light, Jian Chen's face changed suddenly as he realized this newcomer was very strong. The enemy was so strong, in fact, that Jian Chen did not dare to go head-on against him. Otherwise he would take on serious injuries. The cyan streak of light traveled quickly through the air. In a flash, it had already reached Jian Chen. At that moment, Jian Chen's face hardened, as he immediately focused his body to the extreme and leapt to the side to dodge it. The attack had brushed against Jian Chen's shoulder before slamming into the ground with a loud bang, leaving behind a huge hole. Jian Chen immediately retreated 15 meters away from his enemy, before stopping to take a look at the hole in the ground, then lifting his head back up. In the night, Jian Chen could make out the figure of the one that had attacked him so fiercely. Seeing his attacker to be around 30 or 40 years old male, Jian Chen didn't think the man was sturdy looking at all. His plain-looking clothes caused the man to appear extremely ordinary. If the man didn't have his right hand raised up to its full height with a cyan-colored guandao in his hand, he would not look threatening at all. Nothing about him was remarkable enough to draw a person's attention towards him. Guandao, while Jian Chen was measuring the male in front of him, the man was calmly staring back at Jian Chen while saying, "You're quite strong, so your opponent has to be me." He looked at Jian Chen with an even stare. It seemed as if Jian Chen was the only one in his eyes right now. The man seemed to completely ignore the screams and shouts ringing out around them. Jian Chen's vision slowly swept his surroundings. The man stood in a position amongst the bandits that clearly stated his status wasn't low. Although there were still plenty of bandits around Jian Chen, once they had seen the man fight against Jian Chen, they had all started to drift towards other mercenaries to fight. Jian Chen's face changed as he realized that this would be the first life or death battle he would be involved in ever since his arrival in this new world. Despite being a veteran of over 100 battles, and having confidence that he was unrivaled in the ways of the sword, Jian Chen was not at all sure that he would be able to land a killing blow on this new person. Based on the man's previous attack, the man's strength was stronger than his own, And since the man's attribute was wind, his movements wouldn't be any slower either. The middle-aged man looked at Jian Chen and slowly brought his guandao higher into the air. The blade of the guandao enwrapped itself in a cyan glow as the wind slowly revolved around the man. Taking note of the man's movement, Jian Chen's focus reached its peak as he prepared himself. Even if he were to use the profound steps, his enemy's strength was far too strong, and with his wind attribute Saint Force that made him specialized in speed, he didn't dare find out what the outcome would be. Ha! Suddenly, the man shouted loudly and dashed forward at a mighty speed towards Jian Chen. The middle-aged man's speed was almost terrifying, and in the blink of an eye, the guandao was almost invisible as it swung down onto Jian Chen's neck. Jian Chen's head tilted to the side as the guandao swept past his head. As the blade came downwards, a few strands of hair were cut from Jian Chen's head. As Jian Chen's head bent to one side, he leaned his body forward and immediately strided out, rapidly closing in onto the man. His light wind sword flashed with a bloody red as it lashed out like lightning towards the man's heart. Against the stronger male, Jian Chen was pulling out all of the stops without hesitation. Jian Chen's speed was so fast that it was his current physical limit. In the blink of an eye, the light wind sword had already hit the middle-aged man's stomach. The tip of the sword immediately became wrapped in sword qi as it pierced through the man's body. Seeing the tip of the sword pierced his body, the middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed to one of shock. However, the middle-aged man reacted soon afterwards, and the strong Saint Force from within him had been drained. The ultimate form of a weapon being to able to fiercely attack and defend at close range was important. Although, the Saint Force surrounding his body was just as thin as he thought it was initially. Chapter 75. Fighting a Saint Master. The light wind sword was like a hot knife cutting through butter as it split apart the man's Saint Force. Despite this, the force of his thrust decreased as it was forced through his protective shell. The tip of the sword didn't falter at all as it continued to stab through towards the middle-aged man. The initial two defenses the man had put up had been smashed to pieces, but by the time the light wind sword broke through the hindrances, the man had already drawn upon his wind attribute Saint Force to immediately propel himself backwards. The middle-aged man stood a few meters away as he stared at Jian Chen hard in the face. His own expression hardened as he spoke. What incredible speed! Jian Chen looked back at the man without saying a word. He felt okay even after pushing himself to his limits. He had pushed his speed to a rate he had never achieved before. But his attack was essentially dodged by the man, so if Jian Chen wanted to land a killing blow on this man in the future, it would be a lot harder. After all, the man's strength was not weaker than Jian Chen's, and he was also a wind attribute saint. He would definitely specialize in speed. In other words, it could be said that against this middle-aged man, Jian Chen had lost any type of advantage. Regardless of how exquisite his swordplay was, if it wasn't faster than the opponent's reaction time, everything would be of no use. In addition, since there was a great difference in their strengths, Jian Chen didn't dare to fight the middle-aged man at close quarters. Your strength has already reached Saint Master, right? Jian Chen asked, his gaze fixed on the middle-aged man opposite of him. The man didn't bother to hide his shock. Correct, my strength is at the middle Saint Master level. After saying that, he broke off from talking before looking at Jian Chen with an odd stare. Your strength on the other hand isn't all that strong, and neither is your wind attribute. Your speed just now wasn't slow at all though, so I'm not sure how exactly you reached such a speed. The man said in a curious tone. Right now his mind really wanted to know the answer. As a person with the wind attribute, if he was beaten in any other aspects, he wouldn't have thought much about it. But in terms of surpassing him in speed, this raised a question that he couldn't easily give up on solving. Jian Chen had beaten him in speed while having much less strength than him and without having a wind-attributed Saint Force, so the man couldn't help but be curious. My apologies, but I have no comment about this question. Jian Chen replied evenly. Hearing this, the other man's stare hardened as he sneered. If you tell me what trick you did in order to make yourself faster, then I will let you leave this place alive. Otherwise, humph. Do you think you could be a match for me with that type of speed? Whether or not I am able to keep up, why don't you come and see? Jian Chen replied to the man's threat. Jian Chen wasn't scared. On the contrary, he was now fully prepared to fight as he clenched the still bloody light wind sword. It continued to emit sword qi from the tip of the blade, and it surrounded Jian Chen's entire body. The man continued to stare at Jian Chen. The glare in his eye never receded. In his mind, he still had some misgivings about Jian Chen's speed. Although Jian Chen had such a fast rate of speed, he did not have a wind-attributed saint force, so he did not have the inborn advantage that the middle-aged man had. Still, he wasn't able to replicate Jian Chen's speed himself. Dodging the sword strike from earlier had taken all of his strength to pull off. If he was just a tiny bit slower, then the man had no doubts that his own heart would have been pierced straight through. For that reason, he was somewhat afraid of the consequences of fighting against Jian Chen. Not only that, but looking at Jian Chen's unblemished clothes, he could roughly guess how fast Jian Chen could move without breaking a sweat. If Jian Chen could move so fast continuously like this, then it would eventually take a huge strain on him. Seeing how the man wasn't attacking, Jian Chen also began to idle about, and began to slowly watch every single movement. Jian Chen knew that in this case, where his speed was slower than his enemy, then his chances of landing a fatal blow on the man would be practically non-existent. All he could do now was to hinder the man so that he wouldn't be able to kill the weaker mercenaries. If he waited long enough, then the mercenary experts would come back and help deal with him instead of Jian Chen. The fighting didn't stop as the two stared at each other. The sounds of battle could still be heard, as both sides kept losing more of their numbers. The floor was dyed red with blood to the point that on some bumpy ground, puddles of blood had formed. The bandits continued to fight with everything they had. The people who managed to survive were excellent figures that had either outstanding brains or brawn. At the moment, both the mercenaries and bandits had an equal amount of people. The two continued to stand there before finally, one of them made a move. With the wind enwrapping the Guandao, the blade resembled a crescent moon in the night as the man ran towards Jian Chen with a 2-meter-long blade in hand. Seeing the man come forward to attack, Jian Chen's eyes flashed dangerously as he brought his light wind sword up in preparation to defend. The man brought his Cyan Guandao down towards Jian Chen's head at an extremely fast speed. Since he was fighting a middle Saint Master, Jian Chen didn't plan on meeting this attack head-on, and nimbly dodged to the side. However, as Jian Chen stabbed with his sword, the man's Guandao changed direction in midair and whistled through the air, as it parried Jian Chen's sword. Jian Chen's face changed as he immediately brought back his sword, reluctant to go against the man's Guandao. Jian Chen's light wind sword was the equivalent to his Saint Force's life. His life was connected to the frail-looking sword, so if his sword were to be injured, then Jian Chen's own life would be too. And if his light wind sword were to break, then Jian Chen would lose all of his cultivation, and his life would be threatened. On the Tianyuan continent, the cases in which people had died due to their saint weapons being broken were commonly seen. It practically happened everywhere. But with the saint weapon being a representation of one's inner saint force's condensation, when summoned outside the body, it would become unimaginably hard. Moreover, it would grow harder as the owner improved. Thus, unless one were to fight someone stronger than him by a large amount, their saint weapons would never break. Since his opponent's strength was already at the middle Saint Master, he was higher than Jian Chen's strength by 2 whole levels. So if Jian Chen's light wind sword were to collide against the man's Guandao, then he would definitely take some damage. Jian Chen couldn't afford this happening, so he had to try to avoid a collision between the weapons at all cost. After all, he would be the only one to suffer from a loss. Once again dodging the man's attack, Jian Chen noticed the man's defenses momentarily showing a large gap. Taking advantage of the rare opportunity, Jian Chen immediately moved towards the man with a silent profound steps and stabbed the light wind sword towards the man's back with a red flash. The sword whistled silently as it traveled through the air, the sound making it seem like the sword had cut through the air itself. Its speed had reached its peak as it approached the man's back. Enveloped with sword chi, the sword slashed through the man's clothing, and then embedded itself into his back, breaking through his skin. Feeling a painful sensation in his back, the man's face changed immediately, but he displayed no signs of immediate panic. He hadn't been fully prepared for Jian Chen's speed, so the wound on his back continued to spray blood as his saint force condensed itself to take care of his wounds. At the same time, the man began to glow bright with cyan light as his speed started to increase rapidly. Before he could even leave a shadow on the ground or for Jian Chen's light wind sword to completely stab into his back, the man immediately leaned towards the side and escaped from the light wind sword's range. The man had already guessed that Jian Chen would stab out with all his strength. At this moment Jian Chen's own guard was at its weakest. Thus, the middle-aged man also grasped onto this difficult opportunity. Dodging the stab, he immediately brought his Guandao high into the air, causing the twinkling cyan color of light to resemble a dazzling moon in the night. With the Guandao left high in the air, it emitted a sharp glow as it flew towards Jian Chen. This blow contained all of the man's remaining strength. Seeing how Jian Chen had fought earlier, the man had already known from previous experiences that Jian Chen would be a hard opponent. Due to Jian Chen's bountiful battle experience, he never had any holes in his defenses. So no matter if it was his attack or defense, his style of fighting could be said to be flawless, with absolutely no gaps. This was especially true since his sword had used all of Jian Chen's abilities this time. Most likely, the only situation where the man could have heavily damaged Jian Chen was if Jian Chen's technique wasn't strong enough. Thus, the middle-aged man didn't have the slightest intention of holding back this attack of his. The Guandao streaked across the air so quickly that if it was aimed towards weaker people, then they would have had no time to react at all. Hua! With an explosive shout, the man brought the cyan-colored Guandao down towards the defenseless Jian Chen's head. From his upper body stroke, the Guandao did not decrease in speed at all and smashed fiercely into the ground. The smash contained all of the man's strength as the Guandao exploded into the ground. The blade of the Guandao sent all of the surrounding dirt flying into the air, creating a huge hole a meter in diameter. At the same time, Jian Chen's silhouette had completely disintegrated due to this sudden move. However, on the man's face, not a single trace of happiness could be seen. Instead, his face hardened in annoyance. An afterimage! The man cried out in alarm. However, as his mind came to this conclusion, an intense feeling of a crisis struck the man's thoughts. Without hesitation, the man leapt towards the side with his natural reflexes, simultaneously picking up his Guandao from the ground and blindly swinging it behind himself. Ding! A loud sound could be heard as the man's Guandao swung back and suddenly collided with the Jian Chen's bloody sword. Just as the sword and Guandao collided, Jian Chen's face suddenly changed. He immediately paled as he felt an intense churning sensation in his stomach, and he immediately retreated. Chapter 76. Using Tai Ji against the enemy, Jian Chen retreated 20 meters before stopping. There was no longer an easygoing look on his face. Instead, he was now deathly pale. There was just too much of a difference between their strengths. Jian Chen could only compete on even ground in terms of agility, but he had just taken a huge loss from the collision between their saint weapons. Although it hadn't done too much damage to him, the middle-aged man's saint force was many times stronger than Jian Chen's, and that blow alone had caused his light wind sword to transmit a huge shock wave which caused some minor internal injuries. The man steadied himself as he stared down Jian Chen. This had been the third time he had nearly taken damage, so he didn't dare belittle Jian Chen anymore. Although Jian Chen was weaker than him, he was relying on a speed that was faster than the man's own. This was a major threat to the man, and he had acknowledged that Jian Chen was stronger than someone of the man's level. However, as he looked at the state Jian Chen was in, he suddenly understood what had just happened and began to laugh. "Brat, I admit that you are very fast, but your strength is just far too weak." Without even waiting for Jian Chen to catch his breath, he immediately flew forward with his 2-meter-long Guandao ready to cleave him in two. Because of the collision between the light wind sword and the Guandao, Jian Chen had suffered some damage. Since his opponent was 2 levels higher than himself and had reached middle saint level, the impacts of these light injuries were fatal. After all, Jian Chen had been able to use the profound steps to fight against his opponent during his peak state only. But now that he was in an injured state, he was no longer capable of being so nimble. Dodging attacks had already expended his energy. As the man continued to exchange blows with Jian Chen, he had realized that the threat Jian Chen originally was to him was slowly decreasing, causing his guard to similarly slacken. Using all of his strength, he struck out towards Jian Chen, hoping for a fatal blow. His speed was even faster than before. With the man's speed growing faster, Jian Chen was using up more and more energy. If he was in perfect condition, then not only would Jian Chen have an easier time dodging the man, but he would have been able to fight back as well. But now that he was injured, he could only dodge without attacking, and since the man was quickly increasing his movement speed, Jian Chen's every dodge was getting more and more dangerous. The man's blows were getting exponentially faster. He managed to attack dozens of times within an instant, and at this point, blood-stained cuts had appeared in Jian Chen's clothes, since he no longer had the ability to counter. However, it could be seen that Jian Chen's wounds weren't very deep. The cyan-colored light lit up the night as the man's Guandao cut through the night air towards Jian Chen. Although Jian Chen tried his best to dodge the blade, his movements had already become a lot slower than before, and so he failed to dodge it completely. The Guandao left a cut so deep that the bone could be seen on his chest, and a torrent of blood started to leak out onto Jian Chen's clothes. The man gave a fierce laugh as he continued to slash at him. Taking advantage of how Jian Chen didn't move away, the man drew closer. Lightning fast, he kicked out his right foot covered in a cyan light at Jian Chen's chest. Bang! The man's kick sent Jian Chen flying backwards like a bullet. While his body was in the air, Jian Chen couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. As he flew 20 meters backwards past a few bandits before falling to the ground. Afterwards, Jian Chen spat out another mouthful of blood. By now, his face had turned deathly white. With a cyan flash of light, the man strode over 20 meters towards the floor Jian Chen and sneered, "I'll give you this one last chance. If you tell me whatever secret it is that made you so fast, then I'll spare your life. If not, then you will die." The man's eyes flashed with blazing curiosity, and his heart raced at the thought of becoming faster with Jian Chen's technique. To a wind-attributed person, speed was an extremely crucial thing to him. Although he didn't dare to think that his speed would reach a new level, he was certain it would improve his strength and increase his position within the boundless bandits. Thinking about this, the man felt extremely excited. He trembled almost as if he was angry, but he was actually stirred up from his emotions. Jian Chen wiped away the blood from his mouth and slowly stood back up as he glared at the man with an icy look. With a small sneer, he said, "I'm afraid you're not strong enough for it." Despite just being dealt a serious injury, Jian Chen didn't seem to fear the difference in strength between them. As he talked, Jian Chen was readjusting himself into a relaxed position, almost as if he wasn't bothering to guard himself. His right hand had loosened up his grip on his sword. His current state was completely different from the previous him. Jian Chen's words caused the other man's face to sink. He snorted, "Brat, with your strength, you don't have the qualifications to say that. If you're not willing to tell me, then you'd better be prepared to suffer for your own actions." Mid-speech, the man had already started to run towards Jian Chen with his guandao swinging down at Jian Chen's right shoulder. Despite seeing the man approach, Jian Chen showed no signs of wanting to dodge. Instead, he brought his sword back up. Although his sword was moving at the same speed, it appeared as if the sword was as light as a feather, and was floating elegantly in the air. This was completely different from the killing intent he had previously displayed. The light wind sword and guandao collided with each other without making any sound. Afterwards, the softer-looking light wind sword attached onto the guandao like a maggot on a wound, and diverted the guandao's original trajectory. The sword twisted itself in a circle a few times, and immediately transferred the momentum of the guandao cleanly towards the side, causing it to fall to the ground. The man's face changed as he looked at Jian Chen with amazement. Just now, he had been unable to control the movements of his own guandao. If he had been facing an opponent that was only slightly weaker than him, then he wouldn't have been so amazed. But against Jian Chen, who was by far the inferior person, the man was not really able to accept what had just happened. "What technique was that?" the man asked with a look of disbelief. "Tai Ji Jian," Jian Chen answered. When it came to Tai Ji Jian, he wasn't all that proficient at it. However, he had still been in contact with it enough times to understand the Tai Ji Jian's philosophy of using softness to conquer strength. It was the principle of deflecting weapons. Now that he was not only weaker than his opponent, but also in a state where his energy was all but gone now, Jian Chen was forced to use the Tai Ji Jian techniques that he wasn't very proficient in to block the attack. Tai Ji Jian emphasized the idea of using softness to conquer strength, in order for the weak to beat the strong. With the ability to deflect attacks in such a way, this would prove to be extremely beneficial to Jian Chen at this current moment. The only flaw was that Jian Chen only had a few ideas on what Tai Ji Jian was like, and was not good at it at all. After all, he was a master of the one-hand swift sword style. Nonetheless, it was proving helpful to Jian Chen against the man at that moment. The man's eyebrows creased together as he ran the word through his head. Soon after, he shook his head and said, "Tai Ji Jian, I've never heard of it." His eyes looked at Jian Chen in a confused manner before laughing. "Brat, although you're quite weak, I didn't think you would know so many techniques. It seems that killing you would be a waste. I should capture you instead. This would be a pretty great favor towards you as well." The man moved towards Jian Chen once more with his Saint Force-enhanced guandao in hand. He had came to a decision that no matter what, he would capture Jian Chen. Although the Tai Ji Jian technique wasn't something he was extremely determined to learn, the man seriously wanted to figure out the technique that had allowed Jian Chen to move so fast. Jian Chen used his Tai Ji Jian to deal with his opponent.
With its profound ways of dealing with each attack from the man felt as if he no longer had any control over his own guandao.
Although he wasn't very proficient in it, Jian Chen's Taiji Jian made the man's strong strength seem practically non-existent. However, it was taking an extraordinary amount of effort on Jian Chen's part. Despite Taiji Jian allowing one to deflect and divert another person's attacks, Jian Chen was only just a saint, so it was taking all of his energy to break away the man's monstrous strength from his guandao and send it elsewhere. So while it looked easy to do, it was actually hard to pull off. But using Taiji Jian was only a temporary defensive method, and not an offensive one. He could only block attacks without being able to capitalize on an opportunity to attack. If it weren't for the fact that his opponent was pressuring him with his attacks, then Jian Chen would definitely not use the Taiji Jian. After a few more moments of close combat, the man was gradually getting angrier and angrier. Every single time he had struck out towards the weaker person, Jian Chen had used his strange technique to change the trajectory of his attack. This caused him to lose control of his saint weapon, and to him, this was utter humiliation.
"You bastard! I don't believe that this is all I can do to you."
The man flew into a rage. He was no longer able to contain his fury, as he continued to curse at Jian Chen fiercely. Soon after, the man's strength grew even stronger, causing Jian Chen to struggle even more to defend himself. His face was already drenched with sweat as his saint force was slowly starting to dry up. Chapter 77. Battle skill. The man's wild attacks were pushing Jian Chen to his limit. After all, Jian Chen was still using all of his might to use his barely proficient knowledge of Taiji Jian to deflect the man's moves. Each time Jian Chen had blocked and diverted the enemy's guandao, a large part of his saint force was used up.
With the both of them fiercely fighting it out, they had already used up more than half of their saint forces.
Since Jian Chen had a serious gash across his chest, he was starting to feel quite weak as time went on. Even just blocking was getting harder now. Jian Chen's beginning saint strength was able to contend with a middle saint master thanks to his higher expertise with the sword and his past experiences from the countless number of battles he had been in his past life. If it was another person with Jian Chen's strength, then it would be hard to say if they would be able to last 10 rounds against the man's storm-like blows. After all, the difference between a saint and a saint master was huge. There were at least 2 levels separating the two. The cyan-colored blade ripped through the air once more as it slashed down towards the light wind sword. At last, Jian Chen wasn't able to deflect the guandao's frightening power, and his sword was sent recoiling backwards. While the light wind sword wasn't hurt in any way, it had been forced back into Jian Chen's chest with a loud bang. The crash caused Jian Chen to be sent flying backwards 10 meters, before falling onto the ground. He spat out yet another mouthful of blood, filling the sky with droplets of it. "Brat, I can tell that you don't even have the energy to escape from my blows now. Just be obedient and come along with me." The man sneered. Without waiting for Jian Chen to answer, he moved once more, and in a flash, he appeared 10 meters ahead where Jian Chen was. He reached out, and grabbed at Jian Chen's neck with both hands. Coldly looking at the man come closer with his hands outstretched, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with a dangerous glint as he inwardly sighed. "Ai, seems like I have to use my last resort." The last resort was Jian Chen's ultimate life-saving skill. It was the one skill that only he within the Tianyuan continent would know. The Soul Sword. The Soul Sword was learned back when he had fought against Dugu Qiubai a long time ago. At his moment of death, he had made a breakthrough and learned this supreme skill. Yet, just as Jian Chen was about to use his ultimate skill in this predicament, a bright red glow of light suddenly filled up the night sky. It headed towards the middle-aged man, who was currently about to capture Jian Chen. Seeing the giant red sword out of the corner of his eye, the man let loose a look of disdain as he gave a gentle snort. Moving away from Jian Chen, the cyan-colored glow in his right arm began to brighten dramatically, essentially covering his entire arm in a shroud. The man's wind-attributed Saint Force-enhanced arm lashed towards the fiery red sword, firmly catching it in his hand. Taking advantage of this situation, Jian Chen immediately crawled up from the ground and looked at the person who had rescued him with a gratuitous look. The owner of the red sword was a mercenary that looked to be around 20 or 30 years old with an ordinary appearance. The type of person that would blend in with a crowd easily. Yet, this mercenary was no stranger to Jian Chen. This was the kind person he had talked to on the road, Mu Yun. The middle-aged man sneered at the sword-wielding Mu Yun. "You overestimate yourself." Hearing the man talk,
Mu Yun expressed a strange smile and laughed. You're only just a middle saint master yourself, not all that much stronger than me.
I can say what I please. Mu Yun's sword emitted a splendid glow as well as a high temperature. In the night, his sword lit up the area around them with a strong glow. The temperature around them also steadily increased. In just a few moments, the red sword became entirely enshrouded in a blinding fiery red. The light constantly pulsated, making it seem as if the sword was actually on fire. Feeling the saint force surge in endless waves from the sword, the man furrowed his eyebrows together. He let go of the blade, and then fiercely slammed his hand against the blade. Bang! Receiving the energy-filled blow from the man, Mu Yun's sword was sent towards the side. But with Mu Yun's battle experience, he took advantage of this sudden movement to whirl around. The sword traveled in a circular motion as Mu Yun immediately slashed at the man once more. Since you want to die, I'll grant you your wish. The man bellowed, his guandao flashing with a cyan glow as he waved his weapon around. A gentle breeze accompanied his weapon as it flew towards the fire-red sword. Clang! Mu Yun's sword and the man's guandao collided with each other, causing a loud metallic sound to ring out. The moment the two saint weapons separated, Mu Yun staggered 10 meters backwards. On the other hand, the middle-aged man stood as steady as a tai, without any indication of moving. A single glance was enough to see who was the weaker one, and who was the stronger one. Standing on the side, Jian Chen knew that Mu Yun was still weaker than the other man by a large amount. However, Mu Yun was still stronger than himself, and by Jian Chen's estimates, Mu Yun's strength should put him between a middle great saint or a peak great saint. Despite this, he was still much weaker than the other man. Since the man specialized in speed thanks to his wind attribute, he was weaker in terms of attack strength than the fire attributed Mu Yun. The fire attribute was the rarest attribute after the light and dark attributes, and it was publicly known as the strongest attribute in terms of strength. If the man relied on his wind-attributed saint force to fight, then he would be able to dominate the fire-attributed Mu Yun. And if the man were to show the special characteristics of his wind attribute and fight against Mu Yun, then Jian Chen was certain that Mu Yun would not be able to last long in a fight against him. But if he and Mu Yun were to join together and fight, then he was sure that they would be able to beat the middle-aged man. The unfortunate thing was that Jian Chen had taken in heavy damages already. The vital parts of his body had each taken a beating from the fight. In his current state, helping Mu Yun was out of the question. Just standing there was already an abnormally strenuous task. Attacking Mu Yun, the middle-aged man's eyes flashed with strong killing intent. He didn't give Mu Yun time to even readjust himself before gathering the wind around his guandao, and rushing forward, leaving only an after-image where he had stood earlier. In an instant, he appeared in front of Mu Yun, and chopped at his head with extreme speed. When it came to Mu Yun, the other man didn't restrain himself. The moment Mu Yun appeared, the man had tried to kill him. After all, Mu Yun didn't have any special characteristics that piqued his interest. Mu Yun's face hardened. He shouted in anger as the sword in his hand suddenly grew even more red, emitting a boiling hot temperature. At the same time, a flame burst into existence and engulfed the sword within itself. With the fire sword, Mu Yun then brandished it towards the wind-wrapped guandao. The moment Mu Yun waved his sword, it transformed into 3 giant snakes of fire. The first 2 flew out towards the guandao, while the last one flew towards the enemy himself. Bang! The guandao and the fire snakes collided with a huge crash. The 2 flaming snakes had been cut in half by the guandao, causing sparks to fly out everywhere. If one were to look at it from far away, the sight looked like it was a flower that was getting ready to bloom. While the first 2 snakes had been stopped by the guandao, the third snake had become like a fierce tiger, increasing in temperature as it traveled through the air towards the man. Just as the third fire snake was flying towards the middle-aged man, his right hand loosened its grip on the guandao. The man gathered the wind saint force into his fist, and blew it out towards the fire snake. The fist made contact with the fire snake, causing a resonating crash. Dispersing into the air, the fire snake sent sparks flying throughout the night sky for a while before disappearing into the night. After blowing the fire snake apart with his fist, the man stopped his attack to glance at Mu Yu in astonishment as he cried out in alarm. "This is a battle skill, to think you actually knew one." No one had discovered that the man's right fist had actually turned bright red, and had even swelled up in size. Hearing what the man said, Jian Chen looked at Mu Yun with an amazed look. Jian Chen wasn't very familiar with battle skills, but he knew that they were a cultivational treasure within the Tianyuan continent. It was possible to increase one's strength multiple times with them, and were not things that ordinary people would be able to get their hands on. Jian Chen hadn't thought that the ordinary-looking mercenary like Mu Yun would unexpectedly have such an expensive item. Since battle skills were so rare and expensive, even great saint masters couldn't possibly possess them. Battle skills had both high and low points. Although this was the first time Jian Chen had left his home to travel in the Tianyuan continent, he had read many books in the library, and thus was not inferior in any way to some of the more experienced mercenaries in terms of knowledge. With his foresight, he could tell with a single glance that both Mu Yun's battle skills and cultivation methods were definitely top-ranked. This was because ordinary battle skills and cultivation methods were nowhere adequate enough to be able to produce material flames based on just Mu Yun's strength as a great saint. Chapter 78. Cruel Victory. Mu Yun smiled coldly and said, "You do know something after all." "That's right, this is indeed a battle skill."
The man inhaled sharply as he looked at Mu Yun with a greedy expression.
Battle skills were highly treasured on the Tianyuan continent, and aside from the clans that spanned across multiple generations and experts, no other ordinary cultivator would have won. Although some cultivators came across some battle skills by luck, such occurrences were very few in Tianyuan continent. If one didn't have a profound destiny and extreme fortune, then the chances of getting a battle skill were practically non-existent.
Although the man was a middle saint master and was considered a strong expert in the boundless bandits, he still hadn't grasped a battle skill yet.
Just the sight of one had him drooling. Unfortunately for him, his strength didn't reach the qualifications necessary to receive a battle skill from the bandits. The middle-aged man lightly moved his right fist, and felt a flash of burning hot pain.
But he did not have any anger in his heart, and was feeling quite excited instead. With his knowledge, one look was enough to distinguish that the battle skill that Mu Yun had used was highly advanced.
Although he was a wind attribute, this did not stop the man from desiring the fire-attributed battle skill at all. After all, battle skills were priceless treasures on the Tianyuan continent, and the stronger the skill, the more expensive it was. Haha, the gods have certainly been looking out for me today. Youngsters, your techniques will become mine. The man laughed loudly with extreme excitement. To him, both Jian Chen's secret speed technique and Mu Yun's battle skill would be easily taken and learned. How arrogant! You look too highly upon yourself. Mu Yun sneered. Raising his hand, the red sword immediately ignited as the flames lit up the night.
Slashing at the man, the hidden aura of the sword spread out in every direction.
However, the amount was so small that its aura was virtually undetectable. But for someone like Jian Chen who had a powerful soul, this faint aura could clearly be detected.
The moment he had realized the source of the aura, his eyes widened in surprise. Seeing the sword bring forth a blatantly powerful pressure, the man sneered. "Brat, although you have a special battle skill, your strength is still far too weak."
The moment the fiery great sword made contact with the man's clothes, he disappeared into an after-image, causing Mu Yun's sword to swish into empty air. The instant the man disappeared from sight, Mu Yun's face hardened in concentration. Suddenly, an ear-piercing whistle of a blade could be heard coming from the back. Mu Yun instantaneously changed his sword into 3 giant snakes and made it fly behind him. While in mid-air, the 3 snakes fused together and turned into an even bigger fire serpent. Clang! The sound of metal hitting something resonated through the air as the fire serpent engulfed both Mu Yun and his opponent. The collision had caused the fire to spread out in every direction for a few dozen meters. When the red ripple of energy swept past Jian Chen, their extremely hot temperatures caused Jian Chen's clothes to blacken from the heat.
If it were not for the fact that his clothes were already damp from his blood, then his clothes might have spontaneously ignited into flames.
In the brilliant blaze, both Mu Yun and the middle-aged man staggered backwards. The both of them looked haggard from the trade-off. Mu Yun's originally tidy hair had become messy, while his face had become pale in color.
Even his fiery greatsword had started to lose a bit of its luster. As for the middle-aged man, while he had been enveloped by his wind-attributed saint force, his clean clothes had already started to show signs of burn spots. Both of his sleeves had already been blown apart. Because of the use of a battle skill, the fight between Mu Yun and the middle-aged man was on a much larger scale than the man's fight with Jian Chen. The blaze attracted both the mercenaries and bandits around them, causing both sides to immediately notice the fight out of the corners of their eyes. The moment they saw the radiant blaze, Some of the mercenaries further away cried out in astonishment.
Those are real flames. Unless one is an Earth Saint Master, it's impossible to summon flames out of nowhere. Could it be, that's a battle skill? Battle skill? It's a battle skill. So someone here knew a battle skill. Whether it was a bandit or mercenary, when they saw that Mu Yun possessed a battle skill, they all cried out in amazement. None of them could believe what they were seeing. Battle skills were extremely rare and expensive on the Tianyuan continent. Common mercenaries would normally live their lives without even once witnessing a battle skill. After their shocks wore off, every mercenary's and bandit's eyes started to fill with greed. Battle skills were what cultivators in the Tianyuan continent desired most. Their thirst for these skills far surpassed their desires for cultivation methods. Battle skills allowed one to increase their strength many times more than usual. So many people often fought to the death for these skills. Having a battle skill meant gaining an additional source of protection. Seeing the greed in their eyes, Jian Chen couldn't help but to narrow his eyes. He knew just as much as anyone that people would become jealous of another person's strength. Mu Yun's battle skill had far surpassed what Jian Chen had thought, and now it had been revealed in front of all the mercenaries. Battle skills were treasured greatly, and would bring great trouble to those that had them. Even losing his life over this battle skill wasn't unlikely, since Mu Yun was still considered weak. Right now, not only did Jian Chen take comfort from Mu Yun, but he was also worried for his well-being. Although the two hadn't known each other for very long, and had only met due to chance, Jian Chen knew that Mu Yun had fought the middle-aged man and revealed his battle skill for the sake of rescuing him. Looking at Mu Yun fervently, the man laughed. What an amazing battle skill. You even managed to block an attack that contained all my power as a great saint. He paused for a while before sneering once more, however. You could only temporarily block my great saint attack with the aid of the battle skill. Ultimately, it's not your own strength. I wonder how long you can last. After talking, he lifted his guandao high into the air. Just as he prepared to slash down onto Mu Yun, another strong source of energy suddenly came flying over from the distance. Feeling the source of energy, the middle-aged man grew joyous. He assumed that it was from the experts that the mercenary captains were trying to kill but failed, and his comrades were now coming to provide assistance for him. Arriving from the faraway shadows, a few figures were running towards them at a rapid pace. In a few moments, the figures suddenly came into everyone's line of sight. The moment everyone could clearly see who they were, all the mercenaries cried out in joy. The captains! The captains came back! Captain Lang Tian, the captain came back victorious. There's Captain Xia Ho as well. They killed the experts of the Boundless Bandits. Lit up by the intense blaze nearby, everyone could see that the 5 returning members had wounds of all sizes on them. Their clothes were drenched with blood, and some of them were even carrying corpses over their shoulders. Hearing the shouts from the mercenaries, the middle-aged man and the other bandits all turned unsightly. Immediately, the man turned his head and stared at the returning Xia Ho and his men with a look of disbelief. How? Just how were you able to return alive? The man asked in disbelief as he swallowed some saliva nervously as he tried to get the words out. The middle-aged man knew that their return indicated that his bandit group had already faced imminent disaster. Otherwise, the ones returning would have been his own faction's experts, not the mercenary group's people. The man's words caused all 5 members to look at him. Immediately, the 5 slowly put down the bodies they were carrying and glared at him with powerful murderous intent. Feeling the killing intent of the 5, the middle-aged man's heart raced. Without hesitation, he opened his mouth to say, "The situation is looking bad, everyone retreat." Without even finishing his sentence, the middle-aged man had already dismissed his guandao and used his fastest speed to run away. Although the 5 mercenaries were all somewhat injured, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. With 5 people, the middle-aged man had no hopes of winning. The moment the man had started to move, 2 of the 5 mercenaries immediately chased after him. Hearing the man's earlier words, the bandits all started to give up the fight and scattered in all 4 directions. Kill! Don't leave a single one alive. Hearing that one command, all of the remaining mercenaries immediately sprung to follow it, and began to chase down the fleeing bandits. The mercenaries hated the Boundless Bandits down to their very bones, so they would have never let the bandits run off that easily. With their experts all dead and the only capable member running away, all of the bandits immediately focused on running away. All of their fighting spirit had practically been wiped out. On the other hand, the mercenaries had their courage bolstered after their captains had returned alive after defeating the experts from the boundless bandits. Even the ones who were exhausted had suddenly gained a new spurt of energy and did everything they could to chase and kill the bandits. The sounds of slaughter rang through the night, but it quickly became peaceful once more as the remaining 3 mercenary experts led the mercenaries and killed the majority of the bandits. Only a few of the really fast ones had managed to run away with their lives. Victory! We've won! The boundless bandits were beaten by us. We've beaten the boundless bandits. Once the battle came to a close, the remaining mercenaries all started to cheer loudly. The boundless bandits were a great nightmare to the mercenaries, the personification of the gods of death that couldn't be beaten. Beating the boundless bandits was definitely an achievement they were extremely proud of. Chapter 79. Picking up the pieces at that moment, 2 shadowy figures came running back, only to stop in front of a group of mercenaries. These were the mercenaries that had chased after the middle-aged man. The 2 males looked to be around 30 or 40 years old. Both of their faces were covered with blood and their bodies were filled with wounds which dyed their clothes scarlet with blood. However, while their faces were pale from their fatigue, their eyes were still full of vigor. Seeing the 2 come back empty-handed, it was clear that the middle-aged man had escaped. Hi, that guy has a wind attribute, so he had an advantage over us in speed. Although our strength was better than his, in our current condition, we weren't able to chase him, so he escaped in the end. One of the 2 said. His voice was brimming with regret. Forget it, if he ran, he ran. I didn't think we'd run into the boundless bandits. No wonder they were so strong. If it weren't for our mysterious benefactor in the shadows, then I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to come back. For him to save our lives, he is definitely a trusted person. An older person said as he stood next to the brilliant flames. Already his skin was starting to look a little tanned. Hearing the man talk, the other mercenaries who had returned after killing some bandits all were stunned. From their faces, all of them had some joy but some still had some lingering fear. Captain Lang Tian, are you okay?
A mercenary went up to the man and asked with a worried tone.
The newly named Lang Tian slowly looked down on the various wounds before shaking his head. I've some wounds, but nothing that'll kill me.
He looked at the few mercenaries around him before sighing.
With a sorrowful voice he said, It's a shame, Yun Bai Mu, the captain of the Desert Shadows mercenaries was killed by the experts of the boundless bandits. Hearing the announcement, many of the mercenaries started to grieve. Especially the mercenaries of the Desert Shadows. It was a heavy blow to their mood, however, for travelers of the Tianyuan continent. Seeing someone die was an experience many of them were used to. After a small period of mourning, many of the mercenaries had already become peaceful once more. My comrades, although we managed to beat back the boundless bandits, this was only just a small group. If we were to come across a larger group or even their elites, then we will die on the road. So we cannot afford to stay here for long. Hurry up and dress your wounds and bury our dead brothers. We will have to leave immediately afterwards. Lang Tian announced. Each mercenary immediately got to work by helping each other bandage their wounds and applying herbal medicine. Those who were healthier and less injured went to help dig holes and transport the bodies. Everyone set themselves to do their tasks in silence. No one talked at all, and as each mercenary did their own thing, the atmosphere was incomparably heavy. Jian Chen looked around himself before inwardly sighing. They had ultimately won against the boundless bandits, but to him, this was a wretched victory. After the course of one battle, the 3 mercenary groups had dwindled down to less than 100 people that were for the most part injured. Their entire fighting capabilities had been reduced to a third of their original power, and from the original 10 experts that had led the charge, only 5 of them returned with heavy wounds. One of the mercenary captains was killed in battle, causing another sharp decline in their power. Jian Chen, are you all right? Are your wounds serious? A familiar voice called out behind Jian Chen. Hearing this, Jian Chen turned his head around to see Mu Yun. He didn't know when Mu Yun had got behind him, but he was there now. At the moment Mu Yun's condition wasn't all that good. His facial color was an abnormally pale one, and although he had looked fine while fighting against the middle-aged man, the battle skill placed a heavy burden on Mu Yun after using it to surpass his strength. Jian Chen softly shook his head. I'm fine, pausing slightly. He looked at Mu Yun with a complicated look. Mu Yun, your battle skill was revealed to every mercenary here. On the road, you'll have to be even more careful now. and when you reach a safe spot, get away from the group as far as possible. Otherwise, I'm afraid they'll try to do something. Mu Yun looked around at the busy mercenaries. Jian Chen, I thank you for your concerns, I'll be careful from now on. Although he had said that, Mu Yun's expression did not look at all concerned at the people around him. When it came the mercenaries, Mu Yun did not see them as a challenge at all. Taking note of Mu Yun's unconcerned stare, Jian Chen was slightly amazed. Despite the strength Mu Yun had shown during his fight, Jian Chen didn't think would be able to protect himself within the group. Mu Yun took out a white jade bottle from his space ring and held it towards Jian Chen. This is a top-notch healing medication, drink it and heal yourself up. Thanks. Jian Chen didn't decline his offer and took the bottle from him. Don't worry about it, I'm going to treat my own wounds first and then go help the others. Mu Yun waved before walking away from Jian Chen.
2 hours later, everything was in order as all the dead mercenaries were buried while ignoring the corpses of the boundless bandits.
The mercenaries hated the boundless bandits even after they died, and so they wouldn't bother to pay their respects by burying their bodies. During those 2 hours, Jian Chen had casually treated his wounds and already swapped out the bloody clothes from his fight with a middle-aged man with a new set. Before they had set out on the trip, Jian Chen had prepared a few dozen sets of clothes, so he wasn't worried about running out. Let's go. After everyone was ready, someone called out for them all to start moving. Everyone was prepared to move into the night without stopping for rest or sleep. Ever since the ambush by the boundless bandits, the caravans no longer wished to stay around any longer. Even taking a break would not do. After the ambush from the boundless bandits, the caravan's strength had been greatly diminished, leaving them with very little manpower. Since many members of the boundless bandits had escaped, if they were to bring back a bigger unit to attack them, then the caravan would not be able to survive, let alone think about trying to reverse such an abysmal situation. Jian Chen painstakingly climbed onto his own horse, and began to blindly follow the caravans in the dark. Atop the horse's back, Jian Chen sat with his eyes closed, as he quietly manipulated his Saint Force to heal his internal injuries. He had previously received quite a few heavy attacks from the middle-aged man, so the damage Jian Chen was suffering was quite severe. Moreover, he had consumed a large chunk of his internal Saint Force already, so his current body's condition made even the simplest movements difficult to carry out, let alone fighting. Since Jian Chen was currently traversing the Tianyuan continent, and could encounter danger at any moment, his strength was most important. Thus, Jian Chen continued to expend all his effort in trying to recover his own strength, without daring to stop for even a second. The caravan quickly advanced on the road. Since the people were afraid of reinforcements from the boundless bandits chasing them, their current speed was many times faster than their previous traveling pace. Despite this, it was still only slightly faster than the average person running at their peak speed. After all, the carriages contained many goods, so speeding up further was impossible, even if they wanted to. The current speed had already nearly flipped the carriages multiple times whenever they had passed through uneven parts of the road. Because of the current situation, Jian Chen didn't dare to completely enter a self-healing state. Thus, his severe injuries were only recovering at a snail's pace. At that moment, Jian Chen couldn't help but recall his mother, Bai Yun Tian. He still clearly remembered that time a few years ago when he had injured his third brother, Chongyang Ku. Bai Yun Tian had unexpectedly healed his injuries as if it were the easiest thing in the world, without leaving a single scar. If there was a Radiant Saint Master at the scene right now, the internal injuries within his body would have probably recovered faster. Unfortunately, Radiant Saint Masters were really too rare, and their statuses were highly esteemed.
With the strengths of the 3 mercenary groups currently present, there was absolutely no way they could have invited a Radiant Saint Master.
Just as Jian Chen had thought of Radiant Saint Masters, a divine light suddenly flashed within his mind. Immediately, he opened his previously closed eyes, and in that instant, a bright ray of light seemed to shoot out from his eyes in amazement, dying out immediately afterwards. That's right, I can sense Light Saint Force, and even gather it. I wonder if I can control the Light Saint Force like a Radiant Saint Master would, and be able to heal my own wounds. Jian Chen pondered this furiously. When he recalled the possibility that he would be able to control Light Saint Force just as Radiant Saint Masters could, his heart momentarily surged from the excitement, and was uncontrollably delighted at the thought. Ever since he saw Bai Yun Tian use Light Saint Force to heal Chongyang Ku's injuries back at the Chongyang household, Jian Chen had realized that this power was exactly the special energy that he felt every time he absorbed the world essence during cultivation. At the time, Jian Chen had really wanted to test and see if he could control the light saint force. Unfortunately, due to the various situations that had occurred since then, he never got to try testing his thoughts. Afterwards, this thought had gradually been pushed further and further back into his mind, and he had forgotten about it until just now.
Chapter 80. Blue Wind Kingdom. Jian Chen took a deep breath and slowly tried to control the emotions in his heart. After he had calmed, he immediately closed his eyes and began to cultivate the world essence around him. However, there was a difference between the time he had absorbed world essence in the past compared to now. Jian Chen was able to differentiate the special energy from the world essence and absorb that specific energy into his body. Although in theory this was rather simple, it required an extremely strenuous amount of effort when put into practice. However, to Jian Chen, who had practiced how to use his soul, this wasn't that hard. It would only require more concentration than usual. To the Jian Chen, who was strong in spirit, he could detect the special energy mixed in with the world essence. Aside from Radiant Saint Masters, no one else would be able to detect it. After he had detected the special energy, he immediately used his soul as a vacuum to wildly bring the special energy towards him. As it gathered, Jian Chen absorbed it into his body. Jian Chen understood that once the special energy had condensed to a certain degree, it would emit a faint white glow. To prevent this from happening, Jian Chen absorbed the energy extremely slowly, almost at a snail's pace. After Jian Chen absorbed the special energy into his body, a reinvigorating sensation immediately spread throughout his body. It traveled so quickly that Jian Chen felt as if a ball of warmth had enveloped him. Being bathed inside with this pleasant sensation, Jian Chen's face let loose an expression of satisfaction. When the special energy fused with Jian Chen's serious injuries, they started to heal at an extremely fast rate. So fast that Jian Chen was flabbergasted and couldn't believe his eyes. With this, Jian Chen finally understood how fearsome a Radiant Saint Master was when they used their light attribute Saint Force to treat other people's injuries. The book said that not only could high-level Radiant Saint Masters regrow arms, they could even revive the dead. It would appear that this wasn't a lie. If they could heal injuries like this, then perhaps the Radiant Saint Masters who stood at the peak have truly transcendent skills. Before, Jian Chen had doubted that Radiant Saint Masters could regrow an arm and revive the dead. But after seeing the effectiveness of the energy they used, Jian Chen firmly believed that this was the truth. While riding, Jian Chen continued to use his soul to take the light saint force from within the world essence, before slowly absorbing it into his body. As a result of this constant absorbance, Jian Chen was enveloped in a strange misty fog. It was the special energy that Radiant Saint Masters used. Although there were countless mercenaries nearby, some of them being great Saint Masters, none of them had noticed Jian Chen's strange appearance. This light saint force was a special type of energy that, aside from Radiant Saint Masters, no other cultivators would ever be able to perceive. Even if there was an expert at the peak of the Heaven Saint Master level, they wouldn't be able to perceive it. Because of this, Radiant Saint Masters were exceedingly rare within the Tianyuan continent, since every single Radiant Saint Master had to be born with this innate ability. From birth, their spirits had made special contracts with the Light Saint Force. Thus, Radiant Saint Masters were able to perceive its existence. And as their souls grew, they would gradually be able to control the energy. When the concentration of the Light Saint Force grew to a certain degree, it would become milky white in color. At this point, a cultivator would be able to see the existence of it with their eyes. However, they would not be able to see the Light Saint Force like they would see the world essence. The Light Saint Force would only be seen as a blank space. The night went by quickly for the caravan and its mercenaries. For the entire night, no one slept at all. If they were not trying to clean their wounds, they were trying to heighten their concentration to detect movements in their environment. No one wanted to be ambushed by the boundless bandits once again. Under the tense environment of the mercenaries, the night quickly passed and became day. However, the mood did not lighten at all. Although they had long since departed from their previous resting spot, they weren't safe yet. In this area, many different bandit groups could still attack them. If the mercenaries were in their prime conditions, then they would not fear any bandit group. However, after the boundless bandits, they were all heavily injured, and had lost many of their numbers. With their current strength, if they were to come across another bandit group, then they would only be able to put up a bit of struggle. Although they knew that abandoning some of their goods would help them stay alive, the things that they were delivering were quite precious. Unless it was a last resort, neither the mercenaries nor the merchants were willing to make such a decision.
As the bright, red sun rose overhead, Jian Chen, who had sat without moving for the entire night, finally opened his eyes. Jian Chen could feel a very pleasant and joyous sensation within as he stretched his limbs. After a single night of therapy, Jian Chen's body, which would have normally taken 5 or 6 days to heal from the grievous wounds, had been completely restored. Even his nearly used-up Saint Force had reached a level of saturation that put Jian Chen back at the peak of his strength. Not only that, but Jian Chen could clearly tell that his Saint Force was even bigger than before. I didn't think that I would be able to control light Saint Force like a radiant Saint Master could. Jian Chen cheered internally. He was quite ecstatic to discover this, as it was a pleasant surprise to him. Equipped with this special power, his life would gain an additional source of protection. No matter how serious of an injury he would get in the future, he would be able to quickly heal it at any given place or time. While being happy at this discovery, Jian Chen was also greatly shocked at how effective the Light Saint Force was at healing. If he were to use herbal medicines, then it would have taken him 4 or 5 days to completely heal from his wounds. But using the Light Saint Force, he had been completely healed in a single night. In addition, Jian Chen had been absorbing the Light Saint Force slowly. He didn't want to speed up his absorption rate just in case it was revealed that he could do such a thing. However, Jian Chen knew that he could only use the Light Saint Force as a last resort. It was better to keep it a secret. He had considered this issue very thoroughly. There was a possibility that his ability to control Light Saint Force would raise unexpected issues during a critical moment. Although Radiant Saint Masters were highly revered in Tianyuan continent, this empty glory meant nothing compared to what he wanted for his life. Meanwhile, the road was relatively peaceful for the caravan. There was nothing aside from the occasional weak magical beast. They didn't come across any bandits or stronger magical beasts. With the increased traveling speed, they traveled what would have taken 10 days in 6, and after the 3rd day, the caravan had finally passed the dangerous roads into a peaceful one. They were finally at the border fort of the Blue Wind Kingdom. Seeing the huge faraway walls, every single mercenary let loose a smile, as if a huge burden was lifted off their backs. Although they still had a ways to go, the usually unruly road seemed relatively peaceful. There were few cities that were scattered about Blue Wind Kingdom's vicinity. The caravan would be able to hire some new mercenaries at each of these cities to replenish their battle strength. We've reached the Blue Wind Kingdom. We've finally reached the Blue Wind Kingdom. We're safe now. We don't need to worry about the boundless bandits chasing us. Many of the mercenaries started to cheer out loud with joyous expressions. Even Jian Chen couldn't help but smile faintly. At this moment his heart felt lighter. After all, he was still quite weak, so if he were to leave the mercenaries and get attacked by bandits, then even he would be in dire straits. Although the massive wall could be seen in the distance, there was still 5,000 meters of road. On the way, many people and caravans could be seen traveling about. The caravan finally arrived at the gates to the border fort. However, a guard soldier blocked their path. "Halt! Where did you all come from?" he asked as his eyes swept over to look at the head merchant representative. This type of event was already prepared by the merchants, who immediately had one of the mercenaries negotiate with him. At the same time, the mercenary flashed a few glittering golden things, and carefully placed them into the guard's outstretched palm. The guard inspected the items in his hand closely before smiling widely at him. With a wave of his hand he said, "You may enter." Afterwards, the caravan finally passed through the giant gates of the border fort and entered the Blue Wind Kingdom. After passing through the border fort, Jian Chen immediately calmed down quite a bit. At the very least, he had escaped from the powerful grasp of the Hua Yun sect. Although they held a formidable amount of power within the Jessen Kingdom, Jian Chen was convinced that their powers did not stretch over to the lands of the Blue Wind Kingdom. Not too long after passing through the border fort, they came across a decently sized city. The merchants stopped to rest, and the mercenaries disbanded in order to rest. 2 of them remained to guard the goods. The marketplace had allocated a place for goods to be parked, so the merchants all dropped off their items there. Since they had a few strong experts to ensure the goods were protected, the mercenaries had no need to worry about the possibility of the goods here being stolen by bandits. In actuality, no mercenary would dare rob from this place. Otherwise, they would be unable to exit through any of the city gates, and would be surrounded by the city guards. Chapter 81. Zim Zam Zupidi Woo. After storing away the merchandise, the mercenaries went off to enjoy their free time, and the merchants went to reorganize their military strength. After spending many days and nights constantly rushing without stop, everyone was tired. So the moment they were disbanded, they immediately headed towards the nearest inn and started to sleep. Those who were injured headed off to a place to heal their injuries. Jian Chen tied his horse to the stable area and looked around, only to see a single person wearing regular clothes standing around. After another sweeping glance, he quickly walked towards that person. Arriving behind the person, Jian Chen whispered, "Mu Yun, your battle skill is already known to many mercenaries. Take advantage of this opportunity and quickly leave. Otherwise, I fear that they might try to do something to you." Hearing Jian Chen, Mu Yun turned his head around and smiled at him. "Don't worry. If they want to take my battle skill, they'll find out that it won't be that easy to do." Jian Chen frowned as he looked at Mu Yun carefully. "If it's like that, then I won't speak of it anymore." He paused in thought before asking again, "But now that we've reached the Blue Wind Kingdom, it is nearly time for me to separate from the mercenary group. From this road on, we will no longer be walking the same one. Brother Mu Yun, please take care of yourself." He cupped his hands together respectfully. Although Mu Yun and him had only just met, they were on good terms with each other. Plus, Mu Yun had revealed his secret battle skill for the sake of rescuing Jian Chen, so in his heart, Mu Yun was a decent guy. However, this wasn't enough for Jian Chen to consider him a good friend. "You take care of yourself as well." Mu Yun cupped his hands together in response. "Are the two friends here preparing to leave already? Everyone is exhausted, and so we've prepared a top-rated restaurant for everyone to enjoy. It'd be better to come eat and drink with everyone first." At that moment, a deep voice spoke out towards the other two. Mu Yun and Jian Chen turned around to see an older man who had a smile adorned on his face. Seeing the man, Jian Chen was a little stunned, but he quickly regained his composure. Cupping his hands in respect once more, he said, "This one greets Captain Lang Tian." Over the past few days, Jian Chen had become familiar with the three mercenary groups. The strong man wearing the black robes was Captain Lang Tian, an expert who had reached the Great Saint Master level. Seeing Captain Lang Tian, Mu Yun also cupped his hands in respect. Even with a laugh, this was still considered a respectful greeting. "My two friends, I don't know what to call you two, but when the boundless bandits attacked us, we honestly suffered greatly. It was thanks to you two that our casualties did not get any worse." Lang Tian smiled with a face full of benevolence. "This one is named Jian Chen. Captain Lang Tian is too generous." During the ambush with the boundless bandits, the one who had contributed the most was Captain Lang Tian, who had killed many of the expert bandits. "Your humble servant here is called Mu Yun." What Brother Jian Chen said was correct. The reason why we could successfully push back the boundless bandits was Captain Lang Tian. If not for the captain, then I'm afraid all of our lives would have been forfeit. Mu Yun laughed. Hearing Jian Chen and Mu Yun, Lang Tian's eyes flashed with a brief moment of shame before he quickly concealed it. "My friends Jian Chen and Mu Yun are too polite. Whatever the end result of the ambush was, I still have to thank you as the captain of my mercenary group. For the past few days, everyone had been so worried about the boundless bandits overtaking us, so we've been spending day and night traveling as much as possible and sacrificing sleep. We've really placed a burden on the two of you. I've already prepared a great feast. It would be great if we were to all eat together with joyous smiles. Afterwards, we can all rest well for a few days and heal from our wounds." "All right then, after eating rations for the past few days I've almost forgotten what meat tastes like. I was just about to prepare myself to gorge on a great meal, but since Captain Lang Tian has already prepared a feast, I can save my meal money." Mu Yun readily agreed. Facing Jian Chen he said, "Brother Jian Chen, it'd be for the best if we both went. After eating rations for the past few days, you must be sick of it." Jian Chen shook his head gently. "I appreciate Lang Tian's kindness towards this one, but I have some important matters to attend to. I will have to leave immediately and won't be able to accompany everyone. If I have offended Captain Lang Tian, I beg for forgiveness." Lang Tian looked regretful at that, but he didn't continue to try and persuade Jian Chen into staying. Cupping his hands together he said, "If Brother Jian Chen has some important matters to attend to, then this one won't hold Brother up any longer from his business." After Jian Chen bid farewell to Lang Tian, he immediately left the area. Now that he had separated from the mercenary group, he no longer had any responsibilities. If he wanted to leave, he could leave without notifying anyone. After Jian Chen had left, the black-robed Lang Tian and a few other mercenaries were quietly discussing something within the room of a restaurant. "Caleb, you're sure this mercenary named Mu Yun has a battle skill?" said a white-robed elderly man right next to Lang Tian. He had a head of long black hair that trailed behind his head. His face was bronze in color and had many fierce-looking wounds on it. Since there was still blood on some of his wounds, one could tell which wounds were new and which were old. "Yes, Captain Bai Fei Yun." When the mercenary called Mu Yun used his battle skill, many people around had seen it, so this information is definitely not false. Caleb replied. "That's correct, Captain Bai Fei Yun, Captain Lang Tian. Everyone that survived the ambush can testify this." What Mu Yun used was definitely a battle skill, and it was actually a highly advanced one as well. Another mercenary said.
Originally, this was an important manner that the mercenaries should have reported earlier.
Unfortunately, when they were ambushed by the boundless bandits, the battle skill was the last thing on their minds, since their lives were more important. Even if they were to learn the battle skill, if they weren't alive to enjoy it, it would be completely pointless in the end. Moreover, the current situation was different. Since they had entered Blue Wind Kingdom, they were temporarily safe. Now they could mention the battle skill that Mu Yun had. Although the mercenaries were all in the same group, life on Tianyuan continent was extremely cruel. Even these mercenaries would try to forcibly take an item they were jealous of, just like the boundless bandits had. Such circumstances happened all the time in Tianyuan continent. Hearing these two mercenaries talk, all the other mercenaries in the room frowned. The white-robed man looked at Lang Tian and said, "Captain Lang Tian, what do you think about this situation?" Lang Tian knit his brows together in contemplation before slowly opening his mouth. "I am sure Mu Yun knows that his battle skill has been leaked to all of the mercenaries. But what I don't understand is that with his great saint's strength, why did he not run away at the first chance he had when he knew that his battle skill was leaked? Could it be that he believes we won't make a move against him? Taking a step back, even if he trusts us, could it be that he isn't worried about us trying to force the battle skill out from him? This would bring him an endless amount of trouble, possibly to the point of losing his life." Lang Tian analyzed. Although he looked to be a straightforward person, he certainly wasn't a stupid person. So that means either the mercenary called Mu Yun is just some mindless idiot, or he is relying on some type of support that makes him so fearless. The white-robed middle-aged man muttered to himself. Hearing this response, Captain Lang Tian asked, "I was previously in contact with Mu Yun. In my opinion, Mu Yun isn't a mindless idiot. He's a veteran mercenary that has experience. How could someone like that commit such a fatal mistake? Does anyone know where that Mu Yun came from?" The white-robed middle-aged man continued. "That Mu Yun joined us midway, and is of the same occupation as us. I don't know the exact details though. After all, almost all solo mercenary planning on a long journey will join a caravan, and guarantee that the trip will go smoothly. We can't really question people like that." A middle-aged man responded. He wore a long cyan robe, and his face was slightly pale. If Jian Chen were here, he'd immediately recognize that this man was the one who had agreed to let him join the caravan back in Jessen Kingdom.
The mercenaries in the room all grew silent.
After a while, one of the mercenaries finally couldn't hold back anymore, and said, "Captain, are we doing it or not? If we succeed in obtaining this battle skill, then we'd gain quite a bit of wealth. Even if we don't use it ourselves, we can sell it. Considering how precious battle skills are in Tianyuan continent, we can definitely get a sky-high price for it. After all, this battle skill is of a pretty high quality. Captain, why don't we put our all into this fight?"
Another mercenary said, an eager light constantly pulsing within his gaze.
Captain Lang Tian frowned. However, he didn't immediately reply either. Instead, he turned around to look at the white-robed man next to him, and asked, "Captain Bai Fei Yun, what do you think about this situation?" The white-robed middle-aged man called Bai Fei Yun knit his brows. A light flashed in his eyes, and it seemed as if he was hesitant to reply. After contemplating for a while, Captain Bai Fei Yun finally said slowly, "Captain Lang Tian, I'm sure that you still remember the battle we had against the experts from the Boundless Bandits a few days ago, and how at the end, a mysterious expert secretly aided us, right?" he said in a serious tone. Hearing Captain Bai Fei Yun's words, the expressions of a few of the mercenaries that hadn't known the situation clearly changed. Aside from the 5 that had returned, nobody else knew about what had happened earlier. Originally, These mercenaries had naturally assumed that the experts from the Boundless Bandits had been killed by their own elite captains. However, it seemed that the circumstances were completely different. Captain Lang Tian was slightly moved by this, and said in a voice heavy with emotions, "Of course I remember. If that mysterious expert hadn't helped from the darkness, I'm afraid that we wouldn't have survived the ordeal." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.